Without objection, we revert to reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business is online. If there's no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate files herewith transmitted. Senate file numbers 304 and 1018. Message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading Senate file number 304, an act relating to public safety. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform, Finance, and Policy. First reading Senate file number 1018, an act relating to energy. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Climate and Energy, Finance, and Policy.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 7. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 7, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to employment, the first engrossment.
I call on the member from St. Louis, the author of the bill, Representative Olson, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minnesotans care for one another, and we want Minnesota to be a caring state where all our families can be healthy and safe. I'm carrying House File 7 because everyone gets sick, and the coronavirus outbreak is another stark reminder that when people get sick, they should be able to stay home, not just for their own health or that of a loved one, but for the health of all of us. This bill would ensure that Minnesota is a state where, regardless of the color of your skin, your income, or where you work, you can afford to take the time to recover from an illness at home where you can limit its spread, where a sick child can have the comfort of their parent caring for them, where you can go to the doctor before your illness goes from bad to worse, where you can seek support in the wake of a sexual assault, and where those things don't mean you need to worry about missing bills or losing your job. Unfortunately, for far too many, especially those we've called essential during this pandemic, this isn't the Minnesota they experience. An estimated 36% of working people, which is 932,000 Minnesotans, don't have any paid sick and safe time. This means that in a state with the second most Fortune 500 companies per capita, more than a third of working people in our state face a terrible choice between caring for themselves or loved ones in need and the loss of wages or even employment. Because in many circumstances, it is still legal for workers to be fired for needing to take time off to care for themselves or loved ones. In fact, Black and Latinx workers in our state are even less likely to have access to earned sick and safe time, and part-time workers are 45% less likely than full-time workers. But moreover, the workers in our state who are least likely to have access to earned sick and safe time are the very workers preparing and serving our food, with only 25% access among food service workers. This is also a public health issue. In keeping with what we've seen in more than a dozen states and numerous localities across the country where very similar proposals are already in effect, providing access to earned sick and safe time also brings benefits to employers, including improved recruitment and retention, lower employer health care costs through better use of preventative care, and lower presenteeism or coming to work sick, all of which means higher productivity, fewer workplace injuries, and a healthier workforce in state. The bill before us today tracks closely with those municipal sick and safe time ordinances that have already passed in my own city of Duluth, plus Minneapolis and St. Paul, as well as those now enacted in over a dozen other states. To the bill, Article 1, Section 1 merely changes a statutory reference from the existing law governing sick and safe time to the statute proposed in this bill, ensuring that employees can return to their same position at the conclusion of their leave. Section 2 contains the definitions. Of note, all employees except independent contractors working at least 80 hours in Minnesota for a single employer would earn sick and safe time to care for themselves or loved ones in the circumstances detailed in Subdivision 1 of Section 4. Section 3 details the minimum standard for accrual of earned sick and safe time, which is 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, up to 48 per year and up to 80 at any given time, which can be thought of as a bank of accrued, unused sick and safe time. Section 4, Subdivision 1 details the allowed uses of earned sick and safe time, including caring for yourself or loved one due to physical or mental health needs, domestic abuse, sexual assault, stalking, or school or business closure due to weather or public emergency or quarantine. Subdivisions 2 through 5 set out other conditions, including notice requirements, documentation, prohibiting the need to find a replacement, and the increments of time that can be used. Section 4, Subdivision 6 prohibits retaliation against employees who request or use their earned sick and safe time, while Subdivision 7 through 9 protect the employee's position and benefits while using their earned sick and safe time. Subdivision 10 details employee notice of their rights to earned sick and safe time, and Subdivision 11 allows employees to access how much earned sick and safe time they have available. Subdivisions 12 and 13 focus on employer records and the confidentiality of those records, while allowing an employee to access their own records and prohibiting discrimination based on the information contained in those records. Section 5, Subdivision 1 makes clear that the requirements are a floor, that other paid time off policies can meet these requirements, and the construction industry employers can choose to meet these requirements by paying the prevailing wage, whether on a public or private project. Because the statute detailing how the prevailing wage is calculated in the construction industry specifically includes paid time off for injury or illness, disability insurance, and vacation time. Subdivisions 2 and 3 deal with an employee is transferred or terminated and the company changes hands. And Section 7 is the effective date, which is 180 days following the enactment. And Article 2 of the bill creates the enforcement mechanisms for DOLI. They will need to ensure that workers and employers are protected under this bill, which are very similar to the authority that DOLI already has to enforce other wage and hour violations. And finally, Article 3 contains the appropriations. So the $1,306,000 in fiscal year 22 and $1,941,000 in fiscal year 23 for the Department of Labor and Industry, which funds 2 FTEs of education and outreach staff in fiscal year 22 to develop trainings and materials to ensure employers and HR companies are ready for the earned sick and safe time. Includes 11.6 FTEs of investigators and 2 administrative support staff, $310,000 in one-time rulemaking costs, and $30,000 in updates and additional user fees and licensing for case management systems. Next, based on the best practices learned from other states and localities, there's $300,000 in each fiscal year appropriated to grants to community organizations to do education and outreach. And finally, there's $3,000 appropriated to MMB in fiscal year 22 for printing costs to meet the notice and posting requirements for the benefit. Ultimately, House File 7 is about becoming the kind of caring state that I think all Minnesotans want us to be. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'm happy to stand for questions.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 7.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Acom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank Representative Olson for her hard work on the Earned Sick and Safe Time bill. An aspect of this bill that is especially important to me is that it will allow a person time away from work to provide care for sick family members. We all play many roles within our families, and for me, nothing is more important than caring for them in their time of need. As a mother, I've proudly raised 2 boys who are now in college. When they were young and too sick to go to school, I needed to stay home and care for them. To me, that was a core responsibility of being a parent. As a daughter, my mother lived with our family for 13 years until her passing. While a multi-generational household was wonderful, Mom sometimes needed extra help, particularly in her later days when her health or strength were failing. I was so grateful that I could be there for her, given all the times she had been there for me. And as a spouse, many of you know that my husband is disabled from multiple sclerosis and in a power wheelchair. His condition is nothing we could have ever foreseen when we were married 24 years ago, and he is still the most important person in my life. It is critical to me to have the flexibility to be able to get him to his medical appointments now that he can no longer do that on his own. Many of us are caregivers or will become caregivers at some point in the future. This legislation will allow more people to not have to choose between work and caring for their loved ones. Please join me in supporting House File 7 and vote green. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of House File 7. This bill would benefit Minnesotans in many situations, but one that is especially meaningful to me is that it would allow families to be able to spend time with their loved ones who are hospitalized. To many of us, this is a given, but for more than a third of Minnesotans, nearly 1 million people, it is not a given. They face the terrible choice of being with their loved one during a scary and difficult time and the loss of a paycheck or even their employment. And we should be clear about who these people are. These are our community members who are disproportionately Black, Brown, and Indigenous. They are often people earning low wages or part-time workers. Earned sick and safe time is a benefit that some of us already have, but that everyone deserves. I've seen firsthand the need for this policy. My time as a nurse at the bedside was mostly in the neuro ICU. We cared for critically ill patients after brain surgeries, strokes, car accidents, and other traumas. It was not uncommon for family members to tearfully explain that they wouldn't be able to stay with their loved one because they could not afford to take time off of work. Being hospitalized is scary for both the patient and their family members, especially when that family member is critically ill, and even more so when that family member is a child. My colleagues working in the pediatric ICU share heartbreaking stories. They often hear parents say that they feel like they're abandoning their child who is in their sickest and most vulnerable place. It's a simply impossible decision that many families across Minnesota have to make every day. It doesn't have to be this way. We have an opportunity, and I would say a responsibility, to be sure that all Minnesotans can be with their loved ones when they need them most. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Candy Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I wanted to stand and oppose my good friend Representative Olson's House File 7. It's not the right time to do a mandate on business in Minnesota, and let me tell you why. We can't keep adding things to our businesses when they're not even reopened yet. The last year, as we all know, has been brutally difficult for small businesses in Minnesota. This bill doesn't have the support of local chambers. Our local chambers are the voice and the best measure of what is it like to be a business in Minnesota is talking to the chambers, a collaboration of a bunch of businesses talking about business issues so that they can be best aligned to take the best care of their customers and their employees. I'm going to guess that every member here knows that the most valuable asset in any company right now today is our employees. We are dying for new employees. We can't find enough of them. And we have a real serious work shortage issue right now. But putting any more mandates right now on businesses is the absolute wrong time. The bill, the earned sick and safe is not a bad idea. In fact, a lot of small employers are doing it now. We just don't advertise it because we can't afford to put it in necessarily the handbooks that are professionally printed, but we take care of our employees because we have to. It isn't because we are forced to, but we want to, but we care for these people. We've got to make sure that they're taken care of. But seeing these mandated bills coming down the road, House File 7, House File 39, coming down later is House File 1200, the Family Paid Leave Act, these are all not bad concepts, but they have to be worked through and have the timing right to start delivering these kind of things to our businesses. And members, this is at a time when, as I mentioned, our businesses aren't even fully open yet, especially our smallest businesses. And let me just take you back for the last 12 months. We're still under some kind of a peacetime emergency order, and I still don't know why. There's nothing about an emergency that's relevant today. We are not short of PPE. Our hospitals are not setting up outdoor tents like they were last March and April. We can buy Lysol wipes on the shelves right now without even a limit. And toilet paper is all over the place. You can't run out of toilet paper anymore. For many reasons, members, we know that today is much different than it was a year ago. But we still today have a lot of businesses that have restrictions. They have limits on what they can do. It's one of the reasons why I have always voted to suspend and to drop the emergency orders, because we're not in an emergency mode any longer. Are we in a pandemic finishing up this horrible virus and all that stuff? Of course we are. Let's find a way to get through that, but this is not an emergency time. So members, I just want to say that please be sensitive to putting more mandates on businesses when just last session we passed a major bill on wage theft laws that I supported coming off the final version in the House because it finally had a lot of collaborations with business associations and organizations. We got the bill right at the end. This bill, when you do all employees, a one-size-fits-all, is not the right time. It's not the right kind of bill we need in Minnesota at this time. This is going to hurt people. This is going to hurt employees. You know, as an employer, we try to find things that actually keep employees with us longer. We find sticky stuff so they stay with us. Not only is it pay and vacation, it might be 401ks. It might be gym memberships. It might be food allowances. Maybe it's a car allowance. Uniforms, providing uniforms. We do everything we can as a small employer, and that's where I speak from. I'm just a little guy that has about 25, 30 employees that I manage. But I want to do everything I can to make my employees recognize and value my respect for them. And I do everything I can for them. But if we keep putting these mandates on all employees, no matter the size, this is going to be a serious problem for us smallest employers. You know, as you all know, back in December, I worked with my friend Representative Knorr. We passed the business relief grant bill. Representative Haley was involved, Garofalo. We had a bunch of members here kind of teaming up and working on that bill. One of the best parts of that bill was it wasn't a one-size-fits-all, but we tried to right-size it for the larger and the medium and the smaller employees. At the beginning, folks were talking about just giving one check to everybody and these NICS codes, no matter where they were at, just let's get the money out the door. That would have been the wrong thing to do. So we've got to get this right, members. We've got to get it right-sized. So I would support movements like this, but we've got to do it with the right size, with the right businesses, at the right time. Members, this is not the right time. Until we get all of our businesses open again, fully open, no restrictions, we should not be passing bills to put more pressure on these businesses when they're already crippled from a year that has been like none other. So, members, I can't support this bill today. I ask for your opposition to this bill as well. It's not that the bill doesn't have a future, but it's got to be right-sized and at the right time. Thank you.
The member from Kuchiching, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Olson, for bringing forward House File 7. I was fortunate to have a terrific job that afforded my family a good living with a pension, a 401k, and benefits and health insurance. Unfortunately, at my job, we did not have paid sick and safe time for the needed short-term time off to recover from illness or take care of a sick family member. I retired from the plant that I worked at after 29 years, and during my career, I called in sick 3 times. I am, for the most part, a healthy person, but I can guarantee you that if I had a safe and sick time option, I would not have subjected my coworkers to colds and other illnesses that I had because I could not afford to take unpaid time off. The plant that I retired from worked a rotating 12-hour schedule, so taking 12 hours without pay while raising a family just did not work out real well. We used to call the 4-day shifts of the rotating schedule Hell Week because everyone that came in sick would share whatever kind of creeping crud, and that's a technical term, members, that they were carrying, and then we'd go off on our week off and spend most of the time trying to recover. If we had paid sick and safe time option, a lot of shared illnesses could have been avoided. To the employers that offer paid safe and sick time now, thank you. House File 7 is a bill that is long overdue, Madam Speaker and members, and I ask for a green vote.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And, Representative Olson, I consider you a friend. We've worked on some things together. And because I consider you a friend, I see the compassion that you have for people around the state. And I know that you feel a great deal of compassion for people who are in a situation that might need some help like this. But I am standing in opposition of this bill, and I wanted to share with some members who aren't lucky enough to sit on state government finance some of the testimony that we got as the bill was coming through. We heard from school boards, we heard from municipalities. Since then, I've spoken to counties and townships, and they have a lot of concern around this bill because they have no other way to create revenue other than to pass it on to the taxpayer. And school boards don't even have that ability. They would have to go out to some sort of operating levy that would have to be passed, and that is a problem for them. And I think that's similarly a problem for myself. And if all of you are like me, you get your local Chamber of Commerce handbook showing all the membership. It comes to your house or it comes to your office. I regularly call those folks up, and I will also regularly just stop by. Some of you have seen the videos of the places that I've gone to eat some interesting things over the course of COVID. I go and I try to support them, and I have a conversation with them about where they are. And right now, it's a pretty dark place. A lot of them are still suffering tremendously from the shutdowns and the starts and the stops. And what I know, as I call it, a recovering business owner, I was so glad to sell that company, but as a recovering business owner, I know this. I know that I got paid last, that I would make sure my employees were paid. If they needed something, I would put myself last. Didn't always make Mrs. Nash very happy. In fact, she's still a little resentful to this day that we missed a few vacations that we were supposed to take from money that I didn't earn because we made sure we took care of our employees. That's what small companies do. And I look at this a little bit like you're thanking some of the small businesses or businesses in general for making it through the COVID emergency. Thanks so much. We're glad you're here. By the way, here's another thing. And you're going to add to the cost of running that business. You're going to probably cripple many of them. They still haven't got fully opened yet. And now we are bringing this bill. They still don't know whether or not the majority here is going to lift the tax on PPP. So right now, many of them are writing tax checks wondering, where in the world is this coming from? And when am I supposed to get this relief that I've been told might come? And now they have this bill dropped in front of them to say, well, now you're going to have to provide for a lot of time off for a lot of employees, and the ownership is going to go last again. And these businesses, many of them are good, close personal friends of mine. They have taken out second mortgages to keep their businesses afloat. They have zeroed out or dug into their own personal savings to stay afloat, to keep their employees employed. I have several friends who have businesses that they've said, Jim, I am determined to not let people go. If it means that I have to take out personal loans to get there, I'll do it. But when I've shared this bill with them, they question the compassion of this bill. Because they're looking at us down here in St. Paul, and they would love to look us in the eye and say, what are you doing to me? I certainly love and respect our employees, but this is going to kill me. So Representative Olson, I know your compassion, but this bill is just troublesome because there's so many groups that have no way to pay for this. And then the logistics of holding jobs for people, many of them, some in policing. There's no way that they can hold off for that many weeks off and still have that person on the road to do the job that we want them to do. I appreciate your sentiment. I appreciate the idea that you have behind taking care of employees, but know this, as Representative Baker said, so many businesses are already doing things like this. And to put a mandate out there for Minnesota businesses, to require them to dig so deep that they can't, I mean, they're gonna have to dig a hole in their pocket because there's no more pocket for them to dig into. They don't have the money anymore. So please, members, vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to rise in support of this bill today and thank Representative Olson for her strong work on this really important piece of legislation. I'd like to make 3 points. First is I want to talk about the safe time provisions in the bill, which we've haven't gotten a chance to spend much time on. And so this is referring to individuals who have been the victims of domestic abuse, of sexual assault, of stalking. And the bill would allow them to take time off if they're seeking victim services, if they're seeking legal help, or if they're seeking relocation. And we know that surviving abuse and dealing with its aftermath is traumatic, it's expensive, and it can really be time consuming. And I don't think any member in this chamber wants a survivor to run the risk of losing their job or losing wages because they're dealing with these circumstances. We heard in the Judiciary Committee from Violence Free Minnesota, the coalition that stands against relationship abuse, that they had a member who mentioned this in committee just last week, quote, "A survivor we work with lost her job recently because she chose to go to the order for protection hearing she needed in order to keep herself and her kids safe." So we are choosing individuals, forcing individuals to choose between their jobs or keeping themselves safe when they're victims of domestic violence or assault. That's just not right. That's not something that I think anybody wants in our state, for folks to have to make that decision. I represent the city of Minneapolis, and Minneapolis passed a similar law in 2016 after hearing from many workers who were going through situations just like this one. Before Minneapolis acted, half of Black workers had no access to paid time off in the city. Nearly 70% of Latino workers had no access to sick days. So there was some concern that was expressed from businesses beforehand. They didn't know what the policy would look like. They didn't know how it would interact. But I can tell you it's been a non-issue. I asked a council member yesterday how it's been going, and they said it's been implemented with such ease that it's quickly become just an accepted part of the city. But as a part of that, it's protected so many individuals who've had difficult choices and difficult decisions. There have been some comments about this not being the right time to act, but members, a pandemic is exactly the right time to act to help people not have to make a decision between their job and going to work sick or not being able to care for their family. It is still legal to fire workers for taking sick time. And so many workers have faced that really difficult decision this year of choosing between getting paid and staying healthy or protecting the community. And I know this choice myself. I just last year had a child who was sick and in the hospital. And I had to take several days to care for that child. And luckily, I have a wonderful employer. And that employer is Speaker Hortman, who was able to give me the time I needed to care for my child and to be able to take full days off because my child was too young to be in the hospital by themselves. But I've spoken with individuals in my district and in my city who faced that same choice. And before my city passed a law such as Earn Sick and Save Time, they had to make that decision and they couldn't take that time that they needed to be with their child when they were sick. So members, this bill would protect all Minnesotans to be able to have that simple, basic protection, that basic right that we all want to be able to care for our families and our loved ones. It's good for employees, it's good for businesses, and it's good for families. And members, we should support this important legislation. Thank you.
The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I have similar concerns regarding this bill to be foisted onto as a mandate onto employers at this particular time when many of them are just trying to recover or barely stay afloat. I realize that Representative Olson your intentions are good. But so often with government, intentions have ripple effects. You know, the old saying, we're here from the government, we want to help you, doesn't always work, okay? But, you know, I just think this is the wrong time, like other speakers have said, in terms of mandating this onto the businesses. Many of them, especially in the rural area that I'm aware of, and I'm sure in the metro too, are just barely holding on under these emergency powers, which I have to agree with Representative Baker. I'm not quite sure why we have them yet and why neighboring states can be open and we're sitting here with reduced access for our businesses. Nobody's going to pass a law that you have to patronize these businesses, but give them a chance to stay afloat. But I want to concentrate on the bill itself for an example. On lines 9.31 through 10.7, if Representative Olson would yield for a question.
Representative Olson, will you yield to a question?
I will, Madam Speaker.
She will. Representative Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, that particular section, and I could have picked out several others in the bill here as I was looking at it, but it deals with employer succession. In other words, if one business buys another business, what's the rights of the employee? And in section B, starting on line 10.3, it says if at the time of the transfer of the business, employees are terminated by the original employer and hired within 30 days by the successor employer following the transfer, those employees are entitled to all earned sick and safe time, okay? Not used when employed by the original employer. Here, members, I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen, all right? And again, this is just one example of the bill. When we do a one-size-fits-all mandate, what's gonna happen, the employer that the business that buys the other business is not going to hire any of those original employees back till after 31 days. You say, Glenn, how do you know that? Well, when Obamacare was passed, it had a 30-hour requirement for offering group insurance to employees for any private business. Well, you know what happened right in my district? Several employers cut people back from just over 30 hours a week, or maybe 35 hours a week. They cut them back to 29, so they didn't have to give them the group health insurance. Now, they already had group health insurance at that business before Obamacare, but employers couldn't afford to offer the plans that were available through Obamacare. So the employer did what, in order to survive and be competitive, they reduced the person's hours. Guess what happened to the person? They lost their group health insurance. They had to go to the private market or Medicaid or Minnesota Care. And then on top of it, because they had reduced hours, they had to get a second part-time job, okay? So that's what happens, members. Again, was the federal government well-intentioned in giving people group health insurance? Yeah, but look at the ripple effect. This bill contains the same type of provisions. You think you're actually helping, but you're going to have a much greater ripple effect of hurting people. And businesses that are on the fence are actually going to close, and employees are going to lose their jobs. And in some cases, they're going to be laid off because employers simply can't afford to comply with this law. And on top of that, this is one of the worst times to do this to employers. Instead, we should be passing tax relief with the PPP loans and unemployment. Let's help these businesses and individuals get back on their feet so they can hire more people. And you'll find that when an employer is doing well, he will provide the benefits to his employee, as been said by other reps, to keep that employee, especially if they're valuable. I mean, he's going to work with them. Again, I have employees, and I had one several years ago who needed open heart surgery, okay? And I paid her the whole time, her full salary while she was gone, even though I had to hire somebody in to replace her. So, you know, give a little credibility to employers. We don't hate our employees, okay? I just don't know any employer that does, but it has to be fiscally responsible. And so, you know, Representative Olson, do you understand that perspective and how it can actually create more damage than positive when you come with this one-size-fits-all mandates?
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Gruenhagen. I think Representative Gruenhagen, in your story, you actually just illustrated why we need worker protections in law, that there aren't always people acting in the best faith of their employees. And if we, I think the whole point here is that we didn't want to have employers laying off their employees before they sell their company, and 31 days felt right. But if we thought that an employer could go more than 31 days or 30 days without employees, perhaps we should actually make that longer to 60 or something. But I think you actually make a really good case for exactly why we need to have worker protections in law and why a bill like this is so important.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Olson, on that. But again, you provide the reasoning of government and socialism, members. See, and I know you realize this, unlike government, the private sector cannot pass a law to confiscate money from their neighbors to keep their business afloat, okay? They just can't do it. So you can pass all the laws you want with all the mandates and think you're covering every angle. And in the end, there's the business in the private sector of going out of business. And that's happens. And a lot of these businesses, people are putting their heart and soul and everything they have. As was testified before, they even take out loans to keep their personal loans to keep their employees paid and giving them a job. I mean, if you never ran a business yourself, you probably don't realize you're chief cook and bottle washer. So again, rather than my example saying why we need to do even more, you're going to cause even more problems with the one-size-fits-all mandate. Members, for your employees and your constituents, and for your employers who provide the jobs in the private sector, vote no on this, and let's support tax exemption for PPE and unemployment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to support this bill. Representative Olson, thank you for bringing it. I do think it is very important that we pass this legislation. I can appreciate the message from the small business owners that we have in the chamber, and also the former small business owners. I myself have family members that are small business owners, so I always appreciate that. I speak with them often when bills like this come across to get their insight, as well as the businesses in my community. But what I want to share today is a story about a man named Troy Bowman. Troy is a janitor in downtown Minneapolis. I met Troy while working on House File 41 to provide emergency paid leave for essential and healthcare workers. He graciously shared his experiences during committee hearings and amplified the voices of many workers across the state in need of some similar support. Troy had to be quarantined twice, once for exposure and once for testing positive for COVID-19. That totals to 35 days of missed work without pay. 35 days with no income and a piling stack of bills while he battled with his health. Unfortunately, Troy's story is by no means unique or special. Workers all across Minnesota and the majority of our districts face the same dilemma every day. These mostly Black and Latinx workers, also disproportionately women, already live in a state of economic fragility. We have been asking them to risk their lives for months now without a promise to provide a safety net. Black and Latinx workers in our state are even less likely to have access to earned sick and safe time. 42% and 52% lack access, respectively. The fact is, these workers don't have a choice either. We ask them to stay home, social distance, and keep their neighbors safe, with no plan to keep them or their families safe. While many of us have the luxury of logging in from our computers, these workers power through their 8 to 12-hour shifts, reliant on a small chance that to dodge exposure so they can provide food for their children, pay rent, pay their car insurance, or pay a doctor's bill. The pandemic has further exposed and deepened our nation's fault lines of racial and gender inequality. House File 7 is merely one of the many bills aiming to narrow that divide and take care of Minnesota during these testing times. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. This bill will benefit constituents in your communities you represent. Our essential workers are heroes and continue to pay the ultimate price so that Minnesotans can be safe when we go out to purchase daily necessities, renew a driver's license, receive mail, and receive medical services. It's one thing to express rhetorical gratitude for our heroes, but it means so much more to express that gratitude with action. This is our chance to step up and take care of our heroes. I urge you to vote yes on this.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Haley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Representative Olson, I respect your work in the legislature. You and I came in together. But I rise in opposition to this proposal. And I'd like to read you something from a small business owner in my district. I think sometimes we forget that a business owner is also an employee. She writes to me, 1 year ago, so this was about a week ago, right? 1 year ago, so many of my friends took a serious gut punch and were forced to close. I cried for days. My business took a huge hit, both being forced to close at the beginning of last year's March, and then again after that. My business is still suffering huge. It hurts daily. Truly, if I hear someone say this statement to me one more time, you might as well put me in a straitjacket. We are all in this together. Please, unless you have no savings, no retirement, no vacation pay, no paycheck, and no one in your household to support you in any financial way, unless you've sold items out of your house and stood in the food shelf line, even though, again, you're a business owner, you will never know. Closing businesses for this long, and even the partial opening of restaurants, is causing so much damage to families and me beyond our wildest dreams. Don't tell us to just hang on for a little bit longer. Until you have none of everything I mentioned in the above, then you will know the true pain and the loss. Don't get me wrong, the virus is earth-shattering. But we cannot take this much longer. How myself and my other small business owner friends will recover enough to just pay simple bills and keep our employees, no one will ever know. And she goes on. In the state of Minnesota, members, 1.2 million Minnesotans work for small businesses. If we don't support our small businesses during the hardest year that any of them could ever have imagined, they won't stay afloat. And where will 1.2 million Minnesotans, half of our workforce, where will they go back to work? We currently have 300,000 Minnesotans out of work. Our efforts, in my opinion, should be supporting our businesses, stabilizing those ones that are at risk, and being strategic on our economic recovery. This bill does not accomplish those objectives. This is time for us to help support business recovery. It's time for employers to have flexibility in the benefits they offer to their employees that meet their workplace and meet their communities. Employees, in fact, use benefits in order to attract and retain good workers without the state telling them how to do that. I think this bill adds expensive and onerous mandates. It's expansive in its scope, in its language, and in the record-keeping required. Representative Olson, we have done so much bipartisan work in this legislature this past year to help businesses. I think there's better things we could be spending our time on today. We've got two bipartisan bills waiting for action: the PPP tax relief and the UI tax conformity, to help small businesses and to help employees. Minnesota business owners and Minnesota workers are waiting for us to take action on those two items that will accomplish those objectives I stated. Stabilize struggling businesses and strategically get our economy up and running and support our workers who have been impacted by this pandemic. And yet that's not on the agenda today. I scratch my head wondering why. And I scratch my head wondering how Val, my brave small business owner of a shop called Go Brazen on Old West Main Street in Red Wing, how hard she's gonna fight for one more day to keep that business open. Members, please vote no on this bill today. Let's get back to the work that we can do in a bipartisan fashion to help our business owners pass PPP and deal with the UI conformity. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members.
The member from Clay, Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I think we've all gotten this phone call at some point. Ring, ring, ring. The school is calling. Your kid is sick. You need to pick them up. They have a fever. It's a 24-hour rule that the fever has to break before you bring them back to school. Not all of us have had the privilege to be able to stay home for 2 or 3 days. So what happens? You take your kid back the next day. You broke the rule of 24 hours and you expose other kids to whatever illness they may have. This is absolutely the right time. And this is absolutely a bill of compassion. I hear you. This is about businesses. But to me and to many of us, the most important population is our next generation. You said 1.2 million, I think, business owners. We have 1 million kids in our state that are aged 5 to 17 that are in school. We all have kids, we have grandkids, we have nieces, we have nephews. When they're sick, what do? We cuddle them, we help them get better, we make them soup, we take care of them. That's our next generation. Those are our next business owners. Those are the people who are going to help us grow. This bill helps us to be good parents. This bill helps us to show compassion. The safe part of this bill, I think we need to understand that nearly 70,000 victims in Minnesota last year utilized domestic abuse agencies. What we also know is that because of fear and because of stigma, a lot of people don't even report that. So when we start to provide those opportunities for individuals who have gone through massive trauma, we create a change of compare and compassion in our state. I think we all think that that's important. I think that this is absolutely an investment that is timely and needed and is across the aisle. I think we all agree that we care about our businesses, but I think we also agree that we care about our next generations. I absolutely stand in support of House File 7, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
The member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Many folks have said the time is right to act now. Just in my opinion, and many of my fellow small business folks here in Wright County, the time to act now is to get PPP relief right now and conform to the federal government and unemployment insurance tax relief. Sounds like a broken record, but that's the time that we need to act right now. Instead of we're fiddling around with this bill that won't go anywhere because the Senate's not going to pass it at all. So we're wasting time, valuable time, an important time to really help the people that need it in Minnesota, employees and employers. Right now, we are an island in and of itself. You got North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan all have passed PPP. And tax filers are doing their taxes right now and waiting for relief. And yet we weren't even considering it until who knows when. That is the time to act right now, not for this bill. Representative Olson, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth already has paid and family sick time. They passed it several years ago. We also have the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. Many businesses in our state, thousands of them already have implemented this within their businesses. So the time to act is not now for this. The time to act is to really have PPP relief and to help our businesses and employers out there. I'm a small business and we have been struggling. Many strong businesses have been struggling. And to put yet another mandate, a very expensive mandate going forward, is just unfathomable during this time, instead of helping them and lending a helping hand. For those in the past that had sick kids at home because of COVID or themselves, which we pretty much most of us have, we've had federal help. Many millions have had federal monies deposited right into their checks. The state has helped out. We have taken care of our folks and we will continue to do so. But your bill, Representative Olson, will put undue necessary mandates, very expensive mandates on our employers when a time where they really need a hand up, not a handout. At this time, it's going to take potentially years. Some indicate could be 3-4 years for many businesses to finally get back up where they were in 2019. But if your bill is implemented, many simply will perhaps not even survive. So the time to act now on this bill is not, because it won't become law I'm sad for you, Representative Olson, but it won't be. And the time to act for having PPP conformity and unemployment insurance tax relief is now. I don't know why we're wasting time on this bill when we could really be helping individuals that are going through a tough time. So that's all I have to say right now at this point. But we need to really get our businesses helping, and this bill certainly will not do it, unfortunately. So please, I rise. Actually, I'm sitting in opposition of House File 7, and I encourage you not to support this. Let's help our businesses and pass PPP and unemployment insurance tax relief.
The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Madam Speaker and members, I will say this about the DFL. The DFL is consistent. The DFL is consistently out of touch, consistently foolish, and consistently wrong. Imagine what we're dealing with today right now. At a time when businesses across Minnesota, small businesses, are begging you, pleading with you, please don't make us send our PPP loans to you in the form of higher taxes. Please don't do that. Let us keep the assistance you gave us so we can keep up and running. At the very same time they are pleading for that, what is your response? No, we're going to tax it. You're going to have to wait for our tax increases to come along. And two, you come along with an employer mandate, a mandate at the very same time where businesses are low on capital, short on cash, and bleeding money. You want to impose another cost on them. Now, I respect the business ingenuity subcaucus of the DFL, who thinks that we should look to the city of Minneapolis for the signs of innovation and private sector activity. Madam Speaker, members, on behalf of the rest of the state of Minnesota, Minneapolis DFLers, don't give us your business advice. We do not need your business model and problems being exported to the rest of the state. At a time where our businesses are suffering, to have the state government come in, squelch that, and punish them by putting your foot rhetorically on their throats, at a time when they need us most, is foolish. Imagine what happened a couple of months ago, Representative Baker. The support for business, the state of Minnesota was giving money to businesses to help them be capitalized. Now the DFL wants to do the exact opposite and take the money back. Madam Speaker and members, there's a word for this. This word is stupid. Yes, that's the word I use. Now, I'm not describing people. There's good people on both sides of the aisle. But the idea that at a time when businesses are undercapitalized, feeling the pressures of COVID and the labor force contraction, that you would impose another mandate on the smallest capitalized businesses? Madam Speaker and members, that's stupid. That's dumb. We shouldn't be doing that, Madam Speaker. This is an easy no vote. Vote no on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oh, and Representative Olson, I think you're nice too.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm just going to piggyback off of what my colleagues have said. You know, in theory, I actually support what Representative Olson is trying to accomplish here. As a matter of fact, I believe it should be the big businesses, the corporate businesses, the Walmarts and the Targets of the world that should actually be mandated to do this. They're the ones that have profited hand over foot while our small businesses on Main Street were shut down and begging us for help. But Walmart was allowed to prosper, Target was allowed to prosper, Amazon was allowed to prosper, and guess what? Their stocks soared. Do you think Herbie's Bar and Grill in Main Street in Carlos has a stock? No, not at all. Their stock is the customers that are coming in each and every day for cocktails, for coffee, for drinks, for camaraderie, to play the meat raffle, to be able to get together and bounce ideas that is going on in our state. I used to work there, but sadly, not anymore because I was put out of a job because they are struggling, my friends. And it is now just basically just a skeleton crew with hours cut. The hours that I used to work has shifted dramatically from I used to work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now the side where I worked opens up at 3 p.m. during the week. Members, Herbie's Bar and Grill is not prospering during this time, but Walmart, 15 minutes down the road, certainly is. Also, as we're taking this bill up, I find it extremely interesting that I am getting emails every single day to deal with the taxation of the PPP loans, to deal with the taxation of the unemployment insurance. Members, this is the stuff that we are being asked for. Not one constituent of mine has emailed me asking me, oh, Representative Franson, please support Representative Olson's bill. What they're saying is, please do something about the taxation of those PPP loans. Do something about the taxation of the unemployment insurance. That's what's important right now, members. This House File 7 is a distraction. It is a distraction from the issues that Minnesota really wants us to deal with. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members.
The member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'll be brief here. This bill, unfortunately, we're spending a lot of time on today, isn't going to become law. And I think it's a bit of a frustration for those of us in the minority party who have constantly advocated for the business owners who are inadvertently being taxed and charged money that they don't have and expected to pay that in now, and that this chamber has failed to take action. When we actually really could help people today in a very bipartisan way, nothing. And it's not just today, it was last week and the week before and the week before that, nothing. What do we expect from the House DFL? Nothing. Can the House DFL help Minnesotans? Apparently not. That's the frustration. These PPP loans that you've heard about, let me just briefly talk about what that is. Minnesota businesses who were shut down by executive orders by this governor because of the pandemic closed their doors. Many people were put out of work. But businesses were offered PPP loans to help keep their employees employed. If they had not done that, those employees would have been laid off and those people would have been on the unemployment rolls. But we felt, and the federal government felt, it was best that we keep as many of those people employed as possible. So they issued those PPP loans. And there was a requirement that if you spent all of that money, if you spent it all, 70% of it at least had to be on payroll to keep people employed, the rest on other eligible expenses, but you had to spend all of it. And if you spent all of it, the federal government would forgive it. Okay? And in our statutes, the state of Minnesota is taxing that, state income tax on that. Okay? Here's the kicker. The federal government required that they spent it all. They couldn't withhold any of those dollars to pay the tax bill. They had to spend it. So when these businesses did what the federal government asked and kept their employees employed, which was the best thing not only for our state and for our economy and for their business, but for their employees. And now you're going to kick them while they're down. They did the right thing. And now you're going to kick them while they're down and make them pay taxes on that? Because obviously we need the money, right? The state sure needs it. We have a $4.2 billion surplus, the largest in modern history right now. $4.2 billion. We don't need the money. We don't need the money. You know what we need to do with it? We need to let these businesses keep it instead of paying taxes on it, instead of sending it into us. Literally, the state of Minnesota is profiting off of abusing businesses. Does that priority come to the House floor? No. What we have is this bill, another one to hurt Minnesota businesses. It's wrong. Unemployment insurance, displaced workers. The state or the federal government sent $600 to folks per week to help them get through this pandemic, to spur a little economic activity. Federal government's not taxing that. None of the states around us are taxing that, but the state of Minnesota is taxing that. Why? Why are we taking money out of Minnesotans' pockets that wasn't intended to help them at a time of need? And instead of doing those things that will directly help Minnesotans right now, today, we're wasting our time on the stuff that never will become law. And unfortunately, Democrats in this chamber are choosing their ideology over the people who sent them here. I want to help those people. They need our help. A lot of them are waiting to file their tax returns when normally they would get a refund. They probably have gone in and had their taxes prepared, and they're finding out they're going to have to pay a huge amount of money in because the state didn't withhold income tax on that $600 benefit. But this week, no action from the House DFL. Last week, no action from the House DFL. The week before, no action from the House DFL. And next week, we're on break, so no action from the House DFL. Why do you constantly pass up opportunities to really help people when they need it? And instead, we're passing these bills that have no chance of becoming law. I don't know. My constituents sent me here to do something and to help people. I have a feeling yours probably did too. But again, we're missing another opportunity to do that. So thank you to all the members who have spoken today about the necessity to actually help people. And I hope that this doesn't fall on deaf ears, because these people's lives and their livelihoods aren't a poker chip in some political game. These are real people whose lives you're hurting. They're counting on you. Let's actually help them. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For those of you watching from home, I'm sure there are thousands and thousands, there is a form of debate in the Minnesota House in which you throw shade on somebody's bill by saying, I appreciate your compassion and I appreciate what you're trying to do. It's just that you don't understand what you're doing. And so using that same line of argument that has been thrown our direction today, I'm going to suggest that I do appreciate your passion for small business owners. I appreciate your compassion for their concerns, but you don't know what you're doing if you oppose this bill. So far, in the last less than a year, this House has passed into law $260 million to provide direct aid and relief to small business owners. President Biden and Democrats in Congress are sending even more direct aid to small business. It will be 2/3 of $1 trillion by the time all is said and done. We are very mindful of the effect that this pandemic has had on our small businesses. We are very mindful of the effect that this pandemic has had on our economy. That is why we have taken action to make sure that those businesses that are closed and doing the right thing to protect people are not left out on their own. In some of those efforts, you have joined us, and some of those efforts, you have opposed us. But we have consistently been there to support those businesses. But what you don't understand that you're doing in opposing this bill is that you are saying to people in small businesses that they demand the right to make their employees work when they're sick, that they are demanding the right to make other people sick by requiring their employees to work. Spreading disease and spreading illness is not part of the free enterprise system. It is a dangerous, dangerous path. And we have seen the danger of that in the last year. You also don't understand that the same doom and gloom predictions that you've been making on every labor and worker protection bill that we have passed in the time that I've been a legislator, since 2007, the doom and gloom predictions are always wrong. You keep making them, but they're always wrong. When we passed the minimum wage increase, it was going to decimate businesses. When we passed the fourth tier income tax, it was going to decimate businesses. None of those things are true. Minnesota is resilient, Minnesota is strong, Minnesota has the resources to take care of everyone in our state. People who work should be able to earn time off when they're sick. They don't get it for free, they earn it. They accumulate it. They build the right to take paid time off when they are sick through their hard work. And in Minnesota, we should reward hard work. People need to be able to take care of themselves and their families through hard work. Wages need to be adequate to support the workers themselves. Benefits need to be available. When family members are sick, you need to be able to take time off. When you have a new baby, you need to be able to take time off. And it is a lie to say that if you are a low-income person or a moderate-income person and you have a right to leave the job, that somehow that right is meaningful. It is not. If you need the money, you have to work, and everyone knows that. That's what this bill represents. It represents an opportunity for people to actually be able to take the time off when they are sick, when a family member is sick. We will be bringing more bills like this forward because Minnesota workers deserve people in government who are going to make their workplaces fair. We no longer live in a world in which one father can work full-time and take care of a family and send kids to college, have vacations. That world is gone. But our workplace policies still reflect a 1950s era industrial mindset. The fact of the matter is, mothers and fathers care for kids, they care for family members, and they need workplace policies that allow them to stay on the job, keep making money, and continue to support their families financially and with their care. That is the reality of the world that we live in. We need to change our laws to reflect that, and that's what this bill does. Please vote to support this bill today.
The member from St. Louis, the author of the bill, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for a great debate tonight on House File 7. I would just like to respond a little bit to some of what I heard from my GOP colleagues, that you are welcome to support the bill today and make this a bipartisan effort, because I believe we can do both. We can support our small businesses, as we have and we will, and we can protect our workers. And if we don't do this today and you don't join in this effort today, I wonder what that means for the 932,000 Minnesotans that don't have access to this benefit, because that's who we're talking about. And I guarantee we're going to have ample discussion on a number of the topics you brought up throughout the rest of session. But this is your time to vote to support 932,000 workers who don't have access to a single day off to care for a kid, to care for themselves, to get their vaccination. I heard a story this weekend. There were moms playing at the park with their kids, and one of them talked about how she was worried she would even have the time off to be able to go get a vaccination for her family. So we're talking about the implications of this across our state in the pandemic and even how we come out of it and beyond. So this is our time to stand up for those 932,000 workers that don't have access to this benefit, that are some of the most vulnerable in our society, and that's who we legislate for. And that's why we're here today. So I know that we've called this compassion. It is compassion, but it's specifically directed towards exactly what we need to be compassionate about and care about and keep in the mix the people that are often forgotten when we talk about all of the other pieces that have been mentioned today. So I believe we can do both, and I think that we will continue to have these conversations. And so I just encourage all members to support this bill, because no matter where you live, your job, the color of your skin, through our differences, we want the same things. We want to snuggle our kids to make them feel better when they're sick. We want to see the doctor before illness goes from bad to worse. Being able to recover from the flu without worrying about missing bills or losing your job. This bill is about moving towards the kind of caring state we all want Minnesota to be, one that reflects the compassion Minnesotans have for our family, friends, and neighbors. And with that, I ask for your support.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members voting remotely, please vote. The clerk will call the roll of those who have not voted yet.
Bo.
Bo, no.
Bo, no. Damath.
Damath votes no.
Damath, no. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franzen votes no.
Franzen, no. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, no.
Gruenhagen, no. Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman, no.
Heinzman, no. Hertas.
Hertas, no.
Hertas, no. Jordan.
Jordan, aye.
Jordan, aye. Keel.
Keel, no.
Keel, no. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Olson, L.
Aye.
Olson, L. Aye. Pearson.
Pearson, no.
Pearson, no. Quam.
Guam, no.
Quam, no. Sandell.
Sandell, aye.
Sandell, aye. Swazinski.
Brzezinski, no.
Swazinski, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 63 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 39. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 39, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to employment, the third engrossment.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The coronavirus pandemic and the related economic fallout have hit the hospitality industry especially hard. While nearly every sector of the economy has experienced the loss of jobs, the amount of loss in hospitality businesses has been devastating. House File 39 will require covered employers to offer a worker laid off since January 31st, 2020, the option to return to their job by classification and seniority. To ensure the employee receives the offer, the employer must make the offer in writing by mail, email, and text. There are also protections for workers if their employer's operation is sold or transferred. Covered employers are those that are operating a hotel of over 75 rooms, large event centers, which include stadiums and convention centers, building maintenance and security services, airport hospitality workers, and airport workers. The bill calls on the Department of Labor and Industry to enforce the requirements in this bill, which entails investigating complaints from laid-off workers and awarding appropriate damages, including reinstatement, back pay, front pay, and lost benefits. The bill would also allow laid-off workers to bring a lawsuit in district court if the requirements of this bill have been violated. The requirements contained in this bill are in effect through December 31st, 2022. Hospitality employees, many of whom are people of color, have been especially hard hit by COVID-19. As a result, these workers have borne the brunt of the massive layoffs that have occurred because of the pandemic. At hotels especially, laid-off workers are nearly 90% people of color and mostly women. Ensuring the rights of these workers to return to the jobs they held pre-pandemic, as business allows, would be an enormous boost for them and their families and will help address racial economic disparities as our economy recovers from COVID-19. In addition to protecting workers, House File 39 helps achieve a key ingredient to speeding the overall economic recovery, which is maintaining employer-employee relationships. In short, this common sense legislation will help stabilize an important part of the Minnesota economy as businesses and workers alike recover from COVID-19. And Madam Speaker, I'm standing for questions.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 39.
Third reading. The member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of House File 39 because it's the right thing to do for workers that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. The hospitality workers that power our hotels, our event centers, our airports, and make Minnesota a place where people want to come to work and play. These workers faced devastating layoffs when the pandemic hit, and this industry has been slower to recover. And like everything else in this pandemic, people and communities have not been equally affected. These workers are disproportionately people of color, women of color, making lower wages. This bill is about providing those workers with a secure path back to the jobs and careers they've been building for themselves and their families. There are hundreds of reasons to support this bill, and the most compelling reasons are coming from listening to the workers themselves, who've been asking for the simple fairness to be rehired for their jobs when their employers are bringing people back to work. One of those workers we heard from in Labor and Veterans Committee was Leona Williams. She works at a downtown hotel, and she shared her reasons for supporting this bill. She said, if you find yourself in a job you like, where you could see yourself retiring, where you could see yourself being part of something bigger and making a better place, and you see yourself moving up, it means everything to know you'll be able to be there after the pandemic. It would mean everything to me to know that I would be able to return back to my job when businesses come back. Like Ms. Williams, we heard from workers who've been in their jobs for years, workers who've been invested in the success of the companies and their employers, workers anxious about paying their bills, workers who love their jobs and can't wait to return to their coworkers, to their customers, and to serve the public. This is not complicated. At the end of the day, what these hospitality workers are asking us for is the simple protection that the laid-off workers be given the opportunity to go back to their jobs when their employers are ready to bring people back to work. And I'll just close with the words of another worker we heard from, Jamel Thomas, a cook who got laid off at the beginning of the pandemic. And he was asking us, and I quote, for politicians to make sure that we can go back to our jobs eventually, so we can get back to the way things were, or maybe even better than before. Members, that's our charge, to help Minnesotans get back on their feet, back to their jobs, so that maybe it's even better than before.
The member from Dakota, Representative Berg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of House File 39 and thank Representative Carlson for bringing forward this bill. Last night I was helping my son with some homework, and it was ironically an assignment on the minimum wage and the fight for 15. And there were some alarming statistics in the article that we were reading. 8 million workers in the United States make less than $10 an hour, many of which clean your hotel rooms, work at the airport, and work at event centers. 60% of them are women, and we know that they are mostly women of color. We've heard a lot of comments from business owners today, so I'm going to go ahead and come at you as a worker. Refreshing, I know. When I'm not here trying to make life better for my community members, I'm a flight attendant. So when I go to work, I see airport staff and workers every time I go to work. I stay in hotels for a living, and I talk to the workers in the hotels, the ones that clean your room, launder your towels, set out your coffee. And you would be surprised at the amount of pride that these workers have in their work. In the labor community, we have a saying, there is dignity in all work. Representative Nash talked about being a business owner today. He knows the value of loyal employees. And when you treat your employees well, they stick around, everyone prospers. This bill is about allowing workers who take that pride I've spoken about in their jobs to return to work after this pandemic. It's not for big hotel chains, event centers, and airport staffing services to take advantage of this crisis to bring workers in at entry-level wages. Most of our folks here may not ever take the time to talk to these workers, but I assure you, they deserve every dignity and chance at prosperity as the rest of us. Much of our body today has already voted against workers. Here's your opportunity at a little redemption. This is the moral thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Candy Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And will Representative Berg yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Berg, thank you for talking to these amazing employees at the hotels. Thank you for what you do as a flight attendant. Have you, Representative Berg, have you, during the time that you've been in office now, have you been back to work periodically during this period of time to experience the hotel experience since the pandemic has hit?
Representative Berg.
Well, the pandemic's happened for the last year at least, and I've only been here since the 5th. I finished my last trip on the 2nd of January, so yes, I have.
Representative Baker.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. If she would continue to yield.
She will. Representative Baker.
Thank you. Did you feel safe when you went into those hotels? Did you feel that the staff was taking the right precautions up until the time you had to stop and come to work here? How was your experience there, Representative Berg?
Representative Berg.
My experience was that I felt relatively safe given the measures that all the hotels were taking. I also have seen the difference between my 18 years flying and staying in hotel rooms at the level of staffing that was consistent across the various chains of hotels that we stay in. They were definitely understaffed.
Representative Baker.
And thank you, Representative Berg. I'm finished there. I'd like to ask the author of the bill, Representative Carlson, to yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Baker.
Madam Speaker, Representative Carlson, you want to get people back to work, and so do I. This bill, I like the bill. I want to support the bill. But when are we going to start voting to start getting people back to work in a manner that is safe? As your colleague has just said, it's safe out there. We are in a world today that is able to handle more workers to get back to work, but we need you to help support that and your colleagues to start saying to Governor Walz, I think it's time to start doing this. So I can't ask you how you're going to vote, but I can ask you, when will you find it, Representative Carlson, a place in your mind that you need to start thinking it's going to be safe for us to stop the emergency orders so we can get these workers that you're trying to help today back to work?
Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Baker. This is a common sense piece of legislation that simply requires businesses to rehire their past employees when they feel the time is right. So it's not us telling them when they need to bring back their employees. It's when those businesses decide it's the right time for them.
Representative Baker.
Will he continue to yield, Madam Chair?
He will. Representative Baker.
I don't think I heard the right answer, or at least an answer that maybe I didn't ask it right, Representative Carlson. I think you have the control. I don't know if you realize that. There are 6, 7, 8 members over there that would be able to change everything about this in the bill. If you allowed businesses like the hotels, like the restaurants, to start opening more fully, and if the emergency orders were to end tomorrow, it doesn't mean that everything is going to go wide open. Because to be honest with you, a lot of businesses would still be very cautious. But I will tell you this, though, that a lot of businesses will be elated that they can actually start making decisions on their own. They can do it safely. But we need your help to do that. I'm hoping, Representative Carlson, and the final question I'm asking, is will you start looking at this with the immunizations tripling in deployment next week and beyond? Our most vulnerable citizens are now getting covered. Our workers need to get to work. Will you start looking seriously at this kind of a change in your voting habits when you said no many, many times to start lifting this? Is this something that you're committed to doing and talking to the people that you're trying to protect in this bill today? Are you going to tell them and commit to them you're getting closer to that kind of a decision?
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker and Representative Baker, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and the hospitality industry is still reeling from that effect. It's going to be a long time before they recover. This bill simply says when the time is right to consider, or requires them to then bring back those people that were helpful in their success in the first place. The focus needs to be on getting those workers vaccinated. That's where the focus needs to be right now. And that's what the emergency powers are there for, to ensure that those folks are protected so that when we do go back to hotels, that they are safe and they keep us safe.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And finally, we are at that place now where our restaurant workers, our hotel workers are now in that place where they're on the list, and I am grateful for that. Our hotel employees are getting vaccinated the next couple of weeks. Restaurant operators and their employees are also lined up for this. It's a good time. So I would hope, Representative Carlson, and you and your members that want to support this bill, we can't do a lot more than getting them back to work. So I hope in your future, when you have the opportunity, and I mean this, I really truly mean this, we have an opportunity to say to Governor Walz, thank you now. It's been a year and then some. It's not the same emergency as it was back last March and April. This is not the middle of the pandemic, as you just stated. We're at the end of this pandemic. It's not an emergency. If you can do one thing for those employees as quickly as you can start taking a vote to tell Governor Walz it's time. We can do this together. We can be equal branches of government. That's how you can help those employees. Thank you.
Discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wondered if Representative Carlson would yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Robbins.
Thank you. When I've talked to my businesses over the last few months, actually over several months, a lot of them are having trouble when they do offer jobs back for getting employees to come back, because with all the different benefits from the federal government, they've actually been making, in some cases, more by staying on unemployment with the supplemental federal assistance. And so I wanted to ask Representative Carlson, if someone has been offered a job back and they have not accepted it, by my reading of the language in line 5.4, that doesn't sort of excuse the employer from still having to continue to reach out to them if additional jobs become available. Because right now, as has been mentioned, we're not open at 100%. So as more jobs become available, even if someone has already turned down a job, would they still be required to keep offering that same person a job over and over? Is there any end to that?
Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Robbins. Good question. Yes, the bill is pretty clear on this in terms of talking through the worker eligibility requirements as well as the employer requirements as well. And says here, after the employer makes an offer to a laid-off worker, the worker has 5 business days to accept or decline the offer.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. And I saw that as well, Representative Carlson. I just want to clarify. So if they've been offered a job once and they decline within the 5 days, and then future additional openings become available, that employer is not required to again offer the same job or a similar job to that employee who's already declined. Is that what it means?
Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Robbins. Okay, so if it's for a different job, no, they would need to then pose that question to the employee again, is my understanding.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. And that's what my concern is, because it says all jobs that become available after the effective date. So this could happen over and over, even if an employee has turned down the job. And the effective date, members, if you haven't read it, is December 31st of 2022. So the burden on employers to have to keep re-offering jobs to people who have turned them down is really hard to swallow. I mean, they have a lot to manage, bringing people on and continuing to manage it, and the penalties in this are really significant. So members, I urge a no vote on this. This will harm our employers who are really trying to bring people back on board, and I just think unless that language is tightened up, that if someone turns down a job, they do not have to be offered it again, I think this is too onerous, members. Thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. What we just heard was shocking. I had not even realized that portion of this legislation. I was so focused on the fact that this bill, really what it does is it says that if the government chooses to shut down your business, forcing you, of course, de facto to lay off employees, because no employer can maintain their employees when they're not allowed to function. The government gets to shut down your business, and then when the government decides you can open your business again, they're going to force you, they're going to tell you who you have to hire. And what we just heard is that when you offer a job to someone and they turn it down, you have to keep offering jobs to that same person before you can hire someone else. This is bonkers. And of course, it doesn't say anything about the fact that this is what we're focusing on today, instead of providing relief for PPP loans and UI. What are we doing? This is a waste of our time. We are sitting on this floor today talking about forcing employers to offer jobs multiple times to the same person who's already indicated they don't want it, instead of passing bipartisan legislation passed with a veto-proof majority in the Senate to provide relief for our small businesses and for Minnesotans who were laid off during the pandemic. This is bonkers. And not to mention, of course, the fact that, I don't know, according to reports early in the week, I thought we weren't passing legislation that didn't have conservative support. So I don't know what we're doing here, but we're certainly not here helping our small businesses and folks who have been laid off. I urge a no vote on this.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author of the bill...
He will yield. Representative Swedzinski.
Thanks again, members. But this question is kind of along the same lines as the last question. So let's say you've got an employee who is currently receiving unemployment. And because of this bill, you are forced to offer that former employer a position. They turn it down. Are they still eligible to continue to collect unemployment?
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Swedzinski, the bill is, House File 39 is a right to recall. If you've been laid off due to no fault of your own, this bill requires their employer to offer them their job back. In response and follow up to the previous question, if the employee passes on that job and there's another job that comes up, yes, they should have every right to be offered that other job by letter, email, or text. They remain on the list. With regards to the other aspects, this is beyond the scope of this bill, but that is the intent. This is a common sense piece of legislation to protect displaced workers and allow them the opportunity to get their jobs back.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I mean, but we're changing the dynamic. I mean, the whole idea of an employment is that you can't find a job. And if you've offered a job to someone that is currently receiving unemployment benefits through your company and they turn down the job, couldn't you then go to the court and ask that that person be removed from your liability? Because if you've offered them a job back through no fault, I mean, but you're forced to offer that person a job through your bill, doesn't it really change this dynamic and how that would work and their eligibility and your responsibility as an employer?
Representative Swedzinski, are you asking Representative Carlson to yield?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, I am.
Representative Carlson will yield. Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Swedzinski, could you please repeat the question?
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Carlson, so the situation that this bill will develop, if you are forced to continue to reoffer new positions as they come available to the same employee, but if that same employee is currently on unemployment, and obviously you have opportunities to offer jobs, you're going to get jobs, that's why you're on unemployment, you're trying to find work. If you've offered a job to that person, they turn you down because you have to offer it because of this bill. It's, you know, under the current law, through unemployment insurance, you have to be out and actually show someone that you're actually going and looking for work. If you've been offered a job the first time, will you automatically then not have to be paying unemployment on that employee if they turn you down the first time? And how would that react with that?
Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Swedzinski, I'll try to answer your question the best I can. So again, the bill provides that a worker is qualified, if the worker is qualified for a position, he or she, one, for the job that they held, same or similar, they would be qualified. The bill provides that if the worker is qualified for the position, they must be offered that job, and then they would have 5 days in which to either accept or decline. This is pretty straightforward in terms of the requirements on the part in terms of the employer-employee relationship.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would he just yield for one more question, Representative Carlson?
He will yield. Representative Swedzinski.
What if the employee that you are forced to offer to, you do not want to? What if they're not a good employee?
Representative Carlson.
Again, the bill has provisions in terms of when the job would need to be offered. Disqualifying aspects to this would be if there was a, what's the word I'm looking for? If they were discharged due to not, if they were illegally fired beforehand, they would not have to bring them back.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm through.
Any further discussion to the bill? The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker, thank you. And would the bill author yield for just one more question, please, Madam Speaker?
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Representative Carlson, following on the same line of questioning, if I understand your bill correctly, if an employer, let's say a hotel decides to open back up again, and there's a job opening, and he makes the offer to an employee who had been laid off, that employee has, you said, 5 days to decide whether or not to come back. Is that correct, Representative?
Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I apologize. Can the representative please repeat the question?
Representative Anderson.
Representative Carlson, if the employer decides to hire more employees back again and he offers a job to a worker who had been laid off, according to your bill language, that employee would have 5 days in which to make his decision on whether or not to come back. Is that correct?
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative, that's correct.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So if the employee decides to not accept that job and the employer wants to move along and get the business going open again, but he has to wait those 5 days for the employee to make his decision, what about the next time, the second time or the third time that there's a job opening and he has to offer that opening to this same employee? Would the employee have 5 days to decide each time the employer made the offer to him? Would that 5-day period hold true each time that job offer is made to the employee?
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative, yes, once the position has been offered, the employee would have 5 days to decide whether or not they want to accept the position.
Representative Anderson.
So it would seem to me, Madam Speaker and members, that this could be a pretty protracted period of time in which the employer is trying to ramp back up and bring employees back onto the job. If he has to wait a possible 5 days for each employee to make a decision whether or not to come back, this could really slow down the process of opening back up again. And for that reason, among others, I just can't support that bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Washington, Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the bill author yield for one more question, please?
He will yield. Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Carlson, the question that Representative Anderson just asked made me think of something. Are there any provisions in this bill for when the state is under emergency powers? Because if the governor is reopening a business with less than 5 days notice, how is the employer supposed to react if he offers the job back to an employee and they take the full 5 days? What's an employer to do? Wait to reopen until he gets the answer from the employee? Or is there a provision in this bill that would cover different rules, different timetables during emergency powers?
Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, there's nothing in the bill that currently relates to the emergency powers. This is an emergency bill in that it does sunset on December 31st, 2022. With response to, I guess, what is not in the bill, but what I think is reasonable is, sure, waiting 5 days to bring back an employee that you've had for the last 5, 10, 15 years that can start their job back immediately once they begin versus training in a new employee seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Representative Jurgens.
Well, it might seem like a pretty good deal to you, but I'm thinking of many business owners that I've talked to in the last year, primarily bars and restaurants, but it could be other businesses too that get shut down during during the governor's emergency powers. And then they're given the option to open up on very short notice. And so they immediately jump into action to order food, order other materials, beverages, and to bring back staff. But if they have to wait for 5 days, they might not be able to reopen. So I think that that's a flaw in this that maybe wasn't thought of. And honestly, I didn't think of it either until I heard Representative Anderson's questions. And it made me think of that because of the many conversations that I've had with business owners over the past year, waiting for a plan, waiting to have some idea when they were going to be able to reopen so that they can start planning for it. One of the most critical pieces to that planning are the employees. And if somebody is not going to take the option to return to work, those employers need to find somebody that will. So I think that's a flaw in the bill. And even though there's a sunset in this bill that you mentioned, there's no sunset in the governor's emergency powers, and we don't know when that's going to end. So it's reasonable to assume that this could, what I just described, could very well happen. And I think that would be an unfortunate turn offering more challenges to these business owners. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the bill author yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the bill author for yielding something that Representative Jurgens brought up. Actually, it brought up some more questions that I had in that discussion. So in this 5-day waiting period, let's say a bar or restaurant, the governor, as is his custom, to give extremely short notice to these business owners with the expectation they're just supposed to ramp up business with a snap of a finger. But then that kicks in this 5-day waiting period. So you might have an employer, a bar or restaurant, that is waiting because of the uncertainty created by Governor Walz to see if they're going to open and to what degree and how and what manner, indoor, outdoor, all these different variables. So let's say it's 2 days before they're allowed to open per the governor's last minute change in the executive order. And then the employer, bar or restaurant, makes an offer to an employee who has been laid off. That starts the 5-day waiting period. So that if that's 2 days before the employer would open, then that 5-day clock is running. So that would run theoretically 3 days then after the doors are open for the business. Would it be legal under your bill then, while the employer is waiting for the employee to give an answer if they want their job back? Could the employer hire a 1099 temp to fill that particular vacancy while they're waiting for the 5-day period to expire and or get an answer?
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Lucero, I believe. Most employers would tell you that the biggest cost to their business is training new employees. Waiting 5 days for a past employee to get their life in order before starting their job back again, I believe seems reasonable.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would he yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, it's not a gotcha question. It's just something that where the rubber meets the road, when these bills that are ideas actually have to be implemented, these are practical and real life scenarios and questions that have to be answered by the employer. So it's not a gotcha question. Would it be legal in the case of let's say a bartender, right? A bar isn't going to, while they're waiting for their employee's life to get in order to give an answer, whatever the scenario might be, an employer can't offer employees drinks at a bar if there's no bartender. Would it be an option for the employer for maybe 3 days under my scenario to hire their sister or brother-in-law to fill in for a few days under 1099? Again,
Representative.
A gotcha. It's an actual real question, real life scenario. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Lucero, the bill does not mandate that a company rehire its past employees. Only when the business is ready to rehire must they follow the steps laid out in the bill. And the bill describes it very well in terms of the steps that have to be taken in terms of notification and the process in which to then the employee can decide, which is 5 days, whether or not they want to accept the position. This is all part of business planning. This is putting the power into the hands of the employers. As they strategically plan their reopening of their business, they're taking into account, again, it's all right here in front of you. They're going to take into account those 5 days as a part of that business planning process as they begin to bring on more workers.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very concerned at the non-answer answers, either the inability to answer or the unwillingness to answer. But real employers need to make decisions, and they can't make strategic decisions as we've been seeing with the uncertainty created and perpetuated by the current environment that Governor Walz has created. Our great small business employers across the state absolutely want to make strategic planning decisions, but they're unable to do so with last-minute notices, sometimes only days in advance of the ability to be able to open. An employer can't make strategic decisions with mere days' notice. So, Madam Speaker, again, I'm very concerned at the lack of answers we're getting. And also, just back to the questioning that Representative Swedzinski was trying to get. When an employer
has laid off an employee, they qualify for unemployment. And while that employee is on unemployment under this bill that Representative Carlson is offering, if the employer offers that laid off employee who has qualified and is on unemployment, when they're offered their job, if they refuse to get that, the mere question that was asked multiple times that we did not get an answer for, would that employee continue to qualify for unemployment after having refused to take the job back? Why is that a difficult question to answer? Why are we getting non-answer deflective questions or answers to the very legitimate questions that we're asking? I am very concerned about this bill, that it's not ready for prime time. I'm concerned with our small businesses across this state about trying to implement the helter-skelter, non-ready for prime time language in this bill. Members, please vote no. Thank you.
Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the member from Hennepin, the author of the bill, Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for the debate. I was going to share some more stories from the folks that have been impacted most by this. And we heard that from some other members to kind of highlight how important it is for them to want to get their jobs back. But I thought I would close with something else instead. This is a letter that I received from the Minnesota Catholic Conference. I won't read the whole thing, but I do want to highlight some aspects of it. The bill is a common sense piece of legislation that protects displaced workers and allows them the opportunity to get their jobs back when hospitality-related businesses rebound. We understand that employers appreciate as much flexibility as possible, but the bill should be non-objectionable. Employees affected by COVID-19 restrictions should have the first right of refusal when businesses bring back their employees. The employer-employee relationship is a reciprocal one that carries with it rights and duties on the part of both actors. An employee is responsible for fulfilling his or her commitments to the employer by providing honest labor and producing good goods and good services. The employer is responsible for treating his or her employees justly and providing good work and fair pay that is consistent with each person's dignity and personal obligations to family. When that does not happen, this bill is reasonable, and I fully would ask for your support. Thank you, members.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Those voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk please call the names of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Oh, no.
Bo, no. Damath.
Damath votes no.
Damath, no. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franzen votes no.
Franzen, no. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, no.
Gruenhagen, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman votes no.
Heinzman, no. Hertas.
Hertas, no.
Hertas, no. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Novotny.
Novotny, no.
Novotny, no. Pearson.
Pearson votes no.
Pearson, no. Pryor.
Pryor, aye.
Pryor, aye. Schumacher. Schumacher. Swazinski.
Swazinski votes no.
Swazinski, no. Joachim.
Joachim, aye.
Joachim, aye. Schumacher. Schumacher.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 61 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 403. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 403, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to human rights, the first engrossment.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Herr, to your bill.
Good evening, members. House File 403 is the Preventing Pay Discrimination Act. This bill is about one thing, bringing us one step closer to closing the pay gap in Minnesota. Although we've made some progress over the years, the pay gap is still very real in our state. Across occupation and education levels, women still just only make 82 cents on the dollar for what a man makes. The pay gap is even worse for women of color and Indigenous women. Asian women make 71 cents on the dollar, with Hmong women making just 55 cents. Black women make 59 cents on the dollar, with Somali women making just 44 cents. Native women make 56 cents on the dollar, and Latinas make 53 cents on the dollar. Over the course of a career, women lose roughly $400,500 in lifetime earnings because of the pay gap. But this is why we have the Preventing Pay Discrimination Act. House File 403 protects a job applicant from having to disclose their pay history when they are applying for a job or negotiating their salary. We provide this protection by ending the pay history question. This means that an employer cannot require or ask that a job applicant disclose their pay history when they are applying for a job or trying to negotiate their salary. I do want to note that a job applicant can still voluntarily disclose their pay history if they want. And if they do so, an employer is free to use that information in salary negotiations, and they would not be in violation of this policy. Ending the pay history question is a simple and common sense way to help close the pay gap. Pay history questions not only artificially anchor down a woman's pay, but it also means that someone can often not escape the pay gap by trying to get a new job. If a woman or a person of color experiences the pay gap early on, it can lock them into a cycle of pay discrimination throughout their entire career. This makes it more difficult to afford housing, healthcare, education, or other life essentials. But with House File 403, we can finally break this cycle and help stop pay discrimination. It will help ensure that Minnesotans are paid based off of their qualifications, experience, education level, or other relevant factors, but not what you made at your previous job. With this bill, we will join 18 other states that have ended the use of this pay history question. And these are politically diverse states like North Carolina, Colorado, Alabama, and Massachusetts, just to name a few. The results from states that have already implemented pay history bans show that they work. According to Boston University School of Law, states that have implemented pay history question bans saw an 8% increase in pay for women and a 13% increase in pay for Black workers. It is time we join this movement and help close the pay gap in Minnesota. I do want to point out that the bill you have in front of you today received a 12-4 bipartisan vote in Judiciary Committee and a unanimous 12-0 vote in the Labor Committee. During Women's History Month, help close the pay gap in Minnesota.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House File number 403, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A2.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Herr, for bringing this bill. And what this amendment does is it removes, to me, the most troubling part of this bill, and that is the language surrounding the rebuttable presumption. First of all, Madam Chair, before I forget, I would like to have a roll call on this.
Representative Scott requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so, if I might, I just, I'd like to explain the amendment a little bit and why I think it's important to remove this section. And then, but I'd like to start by asking the bill's author to yield for a couple of questions.
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Herr, I'm just wondering if you think that if we remove this rebuttable presumption, if this amendment goes on, do you think that this bill would still allow an applicant for a job to still bring a lawsuit under the provisions that are left in this bill?
Representative Herr.
Thank you, Representative Scott, for the question. So the rebuttable presumption language is necessary because it clearly lays out what the next steps will be if an employer is found in violation of the law. If an employer used a job applicant's past pay to set their wages, then it will be their responsibility to explain why they did that. The rebuttable presumption language sets a clear standard for employers and job applicants.
Representative Scott.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't think there was an answer in there. I just wanted a yes or no. If the rebuttable presumption is removed, if that language is removed from this bill, would an applicant still have grounds for bringing a case under the Minnesota Human Rights Act should the rest of this bill become law?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scott, I think that the rebuttable presumption actually makes the bill language more clear, and it sets better expectations. So I guess I know you're looking for a yes or no answer, but I think that it's pretty clear that it is important for this to be included in this bill.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the bill's author would continue to yield.
She will. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Herr, I listened to the tapes of other committee hearings. I know this was heard in Judiciary. And I listened to, I believe it was in a labor committee of some sort. And the commissioner stated that the concept of rebuttable presumption is just kind of a given in anti-discrimination law. And so what I did is I looked up the statutes to see if that was indeed the case. I'm just wondering if you've taken the time to look in the rest of the human rights statutes to see if rebuttable presumption is in there.
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scott, I did, and rebuttable presumption is found in our statute that deals with reporting maltreatment of vulnerable adults. They use rebuttable presumption within the context that if facilities or businesses retaliates against someone for reporting abuse, then the rebuttable presumption concept applies, and the facility or business must explain why they retaliated against the person who reported maltreatment.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't believe that statute is in the Minnesota Human Rights Statute. I looked through this chapter that this bill falls under, and it's nowhere to be found. And so I feel like the commissioner misled some of the committee members when she said that this was like the basis for this sort of law. And the problem with a rebuttable presumption when it comes to this kind of, for this area of law, is that it kind of turns the American way of law on its head in that you are having to prove a negative. The plaintiff, the burden of proof always falls on the plaintiff. And with the rebuttable presumption, just the opposite is happening. And so my concern here, of course, is that that this is not a concept that is overwhelming in the Minnesota Human Rights Act. and that there's plenty of case law to prove that. And in fact, if you go to, there's a Supreme Court quote from the case is called Sigurdsson versus Isanti County. And it says, the ultimate burden of persuasion, however, never shifts, resting at all times on the plaintiff. And so what you're doing here with this, by adding this piece into this section of the Human Rights Act, and it's not, I'm like, okay, so why are wages and why is that so special as compared to all the other protections, categories of people that are protected under the Minnesota Human Rights Act? Why is there no rebuttable presumption in all those sections of law? If this is a concept, indeed, as the commissioner quoted and as the bill's author really is dedicated to this language, why is it that it's nowhere else in the human rights statute? And in fact, the Supreme Court itself has said the burden of proof always lies on the plaintiff. And in this bill, it's the burden of proof is going to fall on to the defendant in this case. And I think that we're headed down the wrong road with this particular language. If indeed the concept of rebuttable presumption is a standard concept in all of anti-discrimination law, then the rebuttable presumption should be removed, and the courts will automatically apply this analysis under the law, under the Minnesota Health Records Act, in cases under this new law. So I'm not sure why this language is needed. I agree with the bill's objective. I do. Equal pay for equal work. There's not a person in this on this call or in this room in the legislature that would disagree with that concept. And I am concerned about the wage gap. I believe it needs to be addressed. But I think this bill could pass and still accomplish that without having this rebuttable presumption that basically turns American law that treats people when they go into court not as wrongdoers, and it turns that on its head. So, members, I would request. I guess I've requested a roll call on this bill, and I would request that people support this amendment. I think if this amendment would go onto the bill and that section was removed, I think you would get a unanimous vote on this bill, Representative Herr. And again, rather than placing an additional burden like this on our small businesses, let's focus instead on passing stuff that we can all agree to, like not taxing unemployment benefits and not taxing the PPP loans. Members, I ask for a green vote on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion to the A2 amendment. I wondered if the author of the bill wanted to address the amendment before I go to other debaters, so that's why I was looking in her direction. Representative Herr to the A2 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative Scott. And I oppose this amendment. The amendment effectively strips out the enforcement protection in this bill. I know you mentioned that, we shouldn't put undue burden on small businesses, but I think about the undue burden that has been placed on people of color, on women, those who've had to carry the burden of being paid less for their pay for the same job and for the same education and the same experience. And so I'm thinking about that undue burden. What rebuttable presumption means here is that if an employer uses someone's pay history within the context of this bill, it will simply be their responsibility to provide a non-discriminatory reason for why they use the job applicant's pay history to set their wage. So ultimately, the rebuttable presumption language is necessary because it sets a clear standard for both employers and employees. Additionally, after good faith conversations with business stakeholders, we amended in subdivision E, which clarifies a number of questions that an employer can still ask, questions in which the employer can still ask. So there really isn't a need for this amendment. Lastly, of the states that have passed their own pay history question bans, almost all have included some enforcement mechanism for this policy. Many states chose a civil penalties route requiring thousands of dollars in penalties if an employer is found in violation of this law. We wanted to be less punitive, so we chose to go the rebuttable presumption route instead. I suspect that we would all rather enforce this policy through setting clear standards, which is what we have in House File 403, and not with civil penalties.
Discussion to the amendment. The member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just quickly rise to support the amendment, and here's why. In committee, in the Labor Committee, it did pass out unanimously. However, many of my colleagues did question the rebuttable presumption, and that was kind of the sticking point of a good part of the discussion, although a good bill, but that was the sticking point, and we did say to Representative Herr that that was our concern, and she did state that she would work on that as it goes forward to the next committee. So it doesn't appear that maybe that she did that. Perhaps she could correct the record that it didn't change the bill at all and kept that in there. But if Representative Herr, if you could yield to a question and answer that for me, that would be.
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Representative Herr, in committee, we had good discussions and we all supported you. But as you know, there were many concerns regarding that rebuttable presumption, and you did state that you would work on that and look into that for the next committee. So just curious as to what work you did do that to address the minority's concerns.
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative McDonald, actually, I did work on that. I worked with the Department of Human Rights to look through the rest of the statute. We had further discussion with the businesses that we'd been in contact with, which is why we did amend some of the other language around questions that could ask to help alleviate them from being able to be held responsible if they did what they were supposed to do. And so, yes, we did work on that and ultimately decided that the rebuttable presumption would stay within the language. And so just because it stayed the same doesn't mean that I didn't work on it.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Herr. I appreciate that at least you stayed true to your word that you would work on that. It would have been great to notify us, perhaps, that you weren't able to change it with our concerns. But thank you for your efforts. And unfortunately, I will be supporting this amendment, and I hope the rest of you do as well.
The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Madam Speaker, would Representative Herr yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Madam Speaker, Representative Herr, something about me. I went to law school for half a semester. Okay, it didn't go well, right? So can you tell us, for those of us who don't fully understand it, what is, not in the context of this bill, but what is a rebuttable presumption?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker and Representative Garofalo, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I never went to law school, but I'm a fast study. So I've already explained what it is, and I guess I don't know how to make it any more simple when I went through what rebuttable presumption means, that it is if an employer uses someone's pay history within the context of this bill, it will simply be their responsibility to provide a non-discriminatory reason for why they used a job applicant's pay history to set their wage. As Representative Scott said, it puts the responsibility onto the employer.
Representative Garofalo.
Madam Speaker, Representative Herr, I wasn't being sarcastic. I actually did go to law school for half a semester and dropped out. I wasn't trying to project my lack of knowledge in this area on you. If I was doing that, you would know, trust me. Would Representative Herr yield for another question?
She will. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Herr, not in the context of this bill, the term rebuttable presumption, what is that? It's different people are saying it means different things. Can you just tell us what it means? Not in the context of this bill, just what that term is.
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Garofalo, I can only talk about this in the context of this bill because that is the bill that is before us. If you would like to learn more about rebuttable presumption, you could probably go back to law school and finish that law degree.
Representative Garofalo.
Well, Madam
She's
Speaker,
been taking notes. Representative Garofalo.
Well, Madam Speaker, Representative Herr, I didn't mean it that way. I'm sorry, but I'll take your employee guidance to me on going back to law school. I appreciate it. If you would just yield for one more question.
She will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Representative Herr, Representative Scott said that it's not in the human rights statute anywhere else. Was she right?
Representative Herr.
Speaker and Representative Garofalo, it is in discrimination law itself.
Representative Garofalo.
And Madam Speaker, Representative Herr, maybe I don't need to go back to law school. Thank you, Representative Herr.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
I'm so glad I got to follow that because I did go to law school and made it all the way through and I just wanted to say that there's been a lot said here about what a rebuttable presumption is and how unique it is in the law and who has the burden in various cases. That just isn't true. It isn't true that in all cases throughout the law, everywhere you look, the plaintiff always has the burden. In fact, there is many instances of what we call burden shifting in the law, where the burden shifts from one party to the other, depending upon what facts or evidence are put into place. And this is a classic example of burden shifting. The burden initially will be on the plaintiff to establish that pay history was used and received on an application for employment. You actually have to put evidence in that there was pay history collected for the employer. In that case, then there's a rebuttable presumption, which means that we're going to assume that it was used with discriminatory intent unless you can prove otherwise. That's the burden shift. And that method of law has been repeatedly upheld by the courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's not uncommon. It's particularly common in discrimination cases. And so I think that this law is not out of the ordinary. What it is a tough law. It's one that is meant to do what the author wants it to do, which is ensure that there's equal pay for equal work. And so if, as some of my friends on the other side of the aisle have suggested, that they all want equal pay for equal work, here's your chance to prove it. Vote yes. Or vote no on the amendment, is what I should say.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So lawyer pile on, I guess. I'll be real brief, but just want to make sure we're clear about what's exactly happening in this sentence regarding the rebuttable presumption. The employee first has to show that their employer has used their past pay history to determine their future wages, salary, and earnings. So basically, I have to show that the employer, in setting the earnings for this current job, is not based on the nature of the work, et cetera, but that the employer actually went back and looked back at that past history. In that case, then yes, under this bill, the employer then is then determined to have an unfair discriminatory employment practice unless they can show otherwise, and that I think we all would agree to. If in fact you have a situation where the future pay is being based on the past pay, then in fact it should be the obligation of the employer to have some good reason for that, because at first glance you'd say that does not make a lot of sense and seems to be in fact an unfair and discriminatory thing to do. That's all this is set up to do. I certainly agree with Representative Stevenson and others and urge a no vote on this, and I thank Representative Herr for bringing this terrific bill forward. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott, to your A2 closing argument.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and just so many things here. So in this burden shifting that they're talking about, the burden, if they bring a prima facie case, and then the burden shifts to the employer. And if the employer gives a non-discriminatory answer, the burden shifts back to the plaintiff. So in a case where, let's say an applicant comes and they volunteer the information about what their past pay was, but then later they bring a case like this, how is an employer ever supposed to prove that the reason they didn't hire somebody was because of a non-discriminatory reason, when I don't understand how an employer would ever prove this, that they made the decision to not hire that person for another reason with this burden shifting in place. And I understand it goes back and forth in some cases. I think part of the problem here is that in committee, there was some misleading, and whether it was intentional or not, members were made to believe that this rebuttable presumption was in statute throughout the human rights statutes. And that's just simply not the case. So I don't understand why we need this specific language in this case, but not all the others. If indeed, if this is the way that all Human Rights Act cases are handled. So members, this is a good amendment. The bill will still be enforceable whether this language is in here or not. It's still enforceable. A person can still bring a case. So members, please support the amendment. And then we can have a unanimous vote on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk call the names of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Oh, aye.
Bo, aye. Davney.
Dabney, no.
Davney, no. Damath.
Damath votes aye.
Damath, aye. Feist.
Feist, no.
Feist, no. Franzen.
Franson, no.
Franzen, no. Frazier. Frazier, no. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, no.
Hausman, no. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Hertas.
Hertas, aye.
Hertas, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, no.
Mariani, no. Mason.
Mason, no.
Mason, no. Pearson. Pearson. Richardson.
No.
Richardson, no. Swazinski.
Zelinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye.
Will you please recall Franson?
Franzen. Franzen.
All right, I'm plugging it and then plugging it back in.
I'm gonna go off of the VPN here.
Franzen. What? Franzen. Franzen.
This is Representative Cosmic.
She's changing from I to nay? No to yes. Yeah. Franzen is changing from no to I.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lucero moves to amend House File number 403, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A3.
The member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A3 amendment, members, is on the topic of political affiliation. And what this amendment seeks to do is make political affiliation a protected class. And the reason I'm offering it as an amendment to this bill is we're dealing with protected class and discrimination topics, and it's the same chapter in Minnesota statute. In recent days, weeks, and months, we've witnessed examples of political retaliation, and I firmly believe that discrimination of any type should not be permitted, including discrimination based on a person's political perspective, again, not being tolerated. I saw there's a headline and an article back from, this was, I think, January 7th of this year, and just one line in that article. This is a Forbes magazine article where it says, and this is speaking about Trump, members that worked in President Trump's cabinet. Let it be known in the business world. This is a declaration from Forbes magazine. Let it be known in the business world, hire any of Trump's fellow fabulists above, and there's a list there in previous in the article, and Forbes will assume that everything your company or firm talks about is a lie. That was a shot across the bow based on political affiliation. And members, in this advent of social media and increased technology and just the ability to communicate in the digital space, we see examples of employers looking up on LinkedIn. We see people potentially going after and losing their jobs. There's multiple examples of people getting doxxed and losing their jobs because of political affiliation. We've seen examples of people being deplatformed. And members, I just firmly believe that people should not be denied jobs or livelihood because of the way that they vote. So I would encourage members a green vote to the A3 amendment.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
The member from Rice, Representative Lippert, state your point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rule 3.21 states that a motion or proposition on a subject different from that under consideration must not be admitted under guise of its being an amendment. This amendment expands the scope of the bill, introducing a new protected class, so it's not germane and it's out of order.
I find the point of order well taken. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lucero moves to amend House File number 403, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A4.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And let's try another one. Also on the topic of discrimination, but this one is on vaccination status. So we have seen recent headlines in multiple states. There was one in regards to the state of New York, legislation being offered that seeks to require vaccinations. I'm looking at a headline right now that the governor of Connecticut, one line in the article reads, Governor Ned Lamont told National Public Radio listeners Wednesday that vaccination passports were something his administration was going to look at. And members, one's vaccination status should not entitle a person to more or less freedoms. And so that's why I'm seeking to amend. Again, it's the same chapter in law, and therefore I think it is a germane amendment. And I have another headline here in regards to technology. And this one is also from Forbes magazine, and just one line. A coalition of health and tech groups, including Microsoft and Oracle, are creating internationally accepted digital health card. Well, we know, members, that Microsoft is Bill Gates, and vaccine credentials as a condition to conduct commerce is something that we should absolutely not permit. And so again, what my A4 amendment seeks to do is recognize the individual liberty of one's own bodily autonomy, and that this is not an amendment that takes a position on for or against any particular vaccination of any disease. It's just simply saying that one's vaccination status would be considered a protected class, and therefore government, business, others would not be able to deny a person or discriminate against a person based on their informed consent decisions on their own vaccination status. So I highly encourage a green vote. Thank you, members.
Discussion to the A4 amendment.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I raised to a point of order under Rule 3.21, motions and propositions must be germane, and I have advice.
State your advice.
Similar to the last amendment, the Lucero amendment is out of order because it expands the scope of the bill. This bill is narrowly focused on employment issues, and this would expand it. I would hope it's also encompassed in a bill that Representative Lucero has authored, House File 1244. Members, I would hope that legislators would use their platform to educate and bestow the virtues of vaccinations, their ability to save lives, keep each other safe, and bring this pandemic to a conclusion. But that, of course, is not the subject before us in this bill. And so I would urge you to find the Lucero amendment out of order.
Madam Speaker, just quick advice.
Representative Lucero, state your advice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to say hi to the cutie pie that Representative Howard has in his hands there.
I have had the opportunity to review the amendment and the bill, and I find the point of order well taken. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 403.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Fillmore, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I never went to law school. I said I wanted to do something much more honorable. I wanted to be a politician. So I never went to law school, but I've had a lot of attorneys work for me over the years. I've hired a lot of them over the years. And I have always, with my employees, paid the same wage regardless of gender. Always. And I think this bill will help that issue because I truly believe that equal work deserves equal pay. And so I rise today. I wish the Scott Amendment had gone on, and the Lucero ones too, but especially the Scott Amendment. I think she's absolutely right. But I think as this moves forward, that issue can be worked on. But members, as for today, I think we should put up green votes on this. I think the base part of this bill does some very, very good things. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
Discussion to the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Herr. You've been working on this bill since last session, and I've had the privilege of sitting in the Judiciary Committee listening to this debate since last session, and I wish the Scott Amendment would have gone on. There still would have been ample ways for people to file suit without the rebuttable presumption, and I think that really matters. So I probably will be voting against this. But the other thing that I've raised repeatedly in committee that I don't seem to get traction on, so I'm just going to raise it here, is that in line 1.11, it says the employer cannot even consider pay history from any source. And that is just so broad, members. And that's the other concern I have about this bill, in addition to the rebuttable presumption. I don't know how you prove what an employer considered or did not consider, but I think it's very difficult to have that word in the bill. And from any source is also so unnecessarily broad. I so wish this was a bill where it said you cannot ask people's salary. And if the employer asked it, then it would be very clear cut. But this is not the case with this bill, and I'm afraid that it's much too broad, even though I really strongly support the intention of it. So I hope that going forward, Representative Herr, you will continue to think about taking out the rebuttable presumption, and that you will also please consider getting rid of the words consider and any source. Thank you.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry, I'm having major internet problems today. I just want to speak on this bill too, and on the amendment that Representative Scott brought forward, the ability for two parents to co-parent and for the children to know the parents and be able to have equal access to each parent is very important, as well as Representative Lucero's amendment putting vaccination status into the Human Rights Code. Members, we're talking about employment issues here, and there are companies that offer very well right now deliberating whether or not employers have the ability to fire those that do not choose to be vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccination. This is a slippery slope. What Representative Lucero is trying to do is to come in front of the problem instead of us reacting to the problem later on. He wants to be proactive instead of most of lawmaking is reactive. He sees a problem and he wants to react to that issue. Members, in Florida, Governor DeSantis has said, yes, the COVID vaccination task force is a problem he does not support. Meanwhile, in Connecticut State is saying, you know what? COVID vaccination passports or vaccination passports is probably likely to regaining any freedoms that you once had in our state. We see this as something that is on the horizon here in Minnesota. As you know, Governor Walz still holds those emergency powers. And as long as he does so, he can also make by edict rules that state if you want to go to a Twins game, start showing the fact that you've been vaccinated. Those types of situations we are trying to come in front of. We should not be creating two classes of people in the state of Minnesota, of those who choose to be injected and those who do not choose to be injected. Members, that's what Representative Lucero was trying to accomplish. I'm actually very disturbed and saddened that we were not able to have a healthy, robust discussion. He also has these amendments that he brought forward. He actually has legislation for it. It wasn't just some namsy-pamsy, fly on the whim, let's throw out an amendment to trick you guys. He has legislation he has introduced. It has not had a hearing. Members, these are issues that we as policy leaders need to discuss. Thank you.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Democrats in the House, your progressive roots, branches, leaves, and other elements of the plant are showing. We know that progressivism is a front door to communism, the takeover of businesses by government. I've heard this discussion, Madam Speaker, members, in this bill, and also the bill brought forward by Representative Carlson and Representative Olson. Each of them is doing the same thing, having government take over and dictate an element of business that belongs not to the government, but to the employers and the employees in those businesses. We are robbing the freedoms of the marketplace, of the people who are building this country and built this state, and we are knocking them down to their knees. As was outlined earlier, Governor Walz, with his dictates, have knocked them down flat on the floor. They're trying to get up, and Democrats are coming with tax increases in the first bill, with forcing people to rehire people, whether they're performers or not, in the second bill, and now a bill that even does more of the same, controlling the marketplace of employment. Members, what are we doing here? This is not government's role. I find it very amusing that members advocating for these bills, including this one, bring forward the notion and talk about and argue that different provisions in the bill will be the right things to do for businesses. The reality is, members, you don't know what is right for somebody's business. Neither does the government. The government is non-discriminating in their carrying forward of the machinery that we're placing in front of them to chew up Minnesota's businesses that are trying to succeed in the face of all these obstacles that this dictatorial governor and this legislature, the House Democrats, are bent on bringing forward socialism, controlling the means of production in this state, and bringing forward a situation that provides for equal suffering for everybody. We know socialism has been tried many, many times across this planet. It has never succeeded. It's going to fail again. We got to stop this incremental approach to socialism. Stop this bill. Madam Speaker, let's vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Herr, for bringing this bill forward. What we're talking about here today is equal pay for equal work. You know, I watched an experiment recently where they had children and they had 2 tubes of balls. They had one little boy and one little girl. They filled those tubes with balls, and one clearly had more than the other. They asked the children whether or not that was fair. And they clearly agreed that it was not. And in fact, this very kind little boy took balls out of his own tube and put them into the other tube to make them even. If children can understand the concept of equal pay for equal work, surely as legislators and lawmakers, we can understand that as well. Many of you in this chamber know that I've spoken previously about my experience with pay discrimination and the loss of nearly $100,000. Even though I worked in a position in which I had more years of experience, more years at the company, more responsibility, and more teams, and yet still made $20,000 a year less than my male counterparts. And when we looked at a deeper dive, we found that 90% of my department who were women were all making less. That's just not equitable. And I think we all know that. And what's really important to keep in mind is that as we continue down the road that we are, we've come to a place in time where we understand that equity in work, paying people equally for doing the same job, is the right thing to do. We understand that this is how the world works. And I just want to tell you that there was a number of CEOs who were recently asked about this. Jennifer Hyman, the CEO of Rent the Runway, said this. She said, unless business leaders understand the future of their employee base is not willing to accept the unequal environment that has perpetuated in the past, they are not going to be around for the future. But more importantly, when we ask them about the challenges behind whether or not this is actually something that we can do, is it something within our power to do? They asked this very pointed question of the CEO of Salesforce.com, right, Mark Benoit. And he blatantly said that every CEO needs to look at whether they're paying men and women the same. That is something every single CEO can do today. He said, we all have modern human resource management system, but as CEOs, are you willing to step up and say that I pay men and women the same? Members, children understand this concept. This is not a tough call today. Please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the author of the bill, the member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the discussion today. I just wanted to address a couple of really small things. There are a couple of members brought up the difficulty of how an employer would prove they didn't, use somebody's past pay. And so I've had the privilege of interviewing and hiring numerous people. And what I do is I put a rubric together of the education I said you needed and the experience that I said you needed and all of the requirements. And then I set up how much each one is ranked and my pay range. And I set up a little rubric that tells me if somebody has a certain number of years and different things where they might fall in that pay range. That is all documentation that I keep because I never know when somebody's going to come back and see and ask if I treated them fairly in the process. All of those things are things you can submit to show that you were fair in how you screened potential employees and why you offered what you did. And so it's actually quite easy to show that you didn't just use somebody's past pay to base their new pay on. Also, to the point of controlling marketplace and employment, boy, that was really interesting to hear because businesses already have control of everything they do within their business, and just asking them not to discriminate against somebody using their pay is not controlling how they run their business and who they can hire and what they hire. Businesses do market research to determine pay range. They decide the education level needed for a job. They decide how much experience you need. They decide the experience that you should have. They decide all of the other factors that they're going to choose to use to hire somebody, asking them not to consider pay, just as we ask them not to consider race and gender. If somebody is of childbearing age or if somebody's pregnant or might be pregnant, we ask for people not to use those, and it is not okay to use those either. And so we're just adding one more category to this so that we can try to close that pay gap. So I just want to leave us with this. Yesterday, March 23rd, was Equal Pay Day. This signifies how far into 2021 a woman would have had to work in order to earn what a man made in all of 2020. That's 82 days, members. In the year 2021, a woman still must work 82 more days in a year just to earn the same wage as a man. And as I close, I also want to thank my fellow co-authors as well as the members who have voted for this bill in committee. I ask that we make this a vote that really looks at equal pay for all people, and that we can move one step closer to closing the pay gap in Minnesota. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members voting remotely, please vote. Will the clerk please call the roll of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Bo, no.
Bo, no. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franzen votes no.
Franzen, no. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, no.
Gruenhagen, no. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Heinzman. Heinzman.
Heinzman, no.
Heinzman, no. Hertas.
Hertas, no.
Hertas, no. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Moran.
Moran, aye.
Moran, aye. Nelson, N.
Nelson and no.
Nelson, N. No. Noor.
Nor, aye.
Noor, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Swazinski.
Bazinski, no.
Swazinski, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 80 ayes and 51 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 820. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 820, number 5 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to the open meeting law, the first engrossment.
The member from Anoka, Representative Koegel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I've worked on open meeting issues for a number of years now. Most recently,
Representative Koegel, we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, so if you can just speak up a little, that would be helpful. Representative Koegel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I've worked on open meeting issue for a number of years now. Most recently, last legislative session, we passed a bill that I hoped would address pandemic-related issues. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, which is why House File 820 is before the body. What we are trying to do with House File 820 is address the limitations elected officials who have health concerns are facing given the length of the COVID-19 pandemic. As with the state and the legislature, local governments are trying their best to navigate these uncertain times. But when cities are choosing to hold in-person meetings, which is allowed currently as long as the meetings can be conducted safely, there are some elected officials who have health-related concerns that preclude them from attending those meetings in person. Oftentimes, the elected official or close family member is at a high risk for contracting COVID, and if contracted, falls in a high-risk group for serious complications or hospitalization. The legislature did address this issue last session by passing the medical exemption to the open meetings law, but this medical exemption can only be used 3 times per calendar year. Because this pandemic has lasted longer than anyone would like, the cap on this medical exemption has been met quickly. In some cases, an elected official has reached their cap in just 1 month of scheduled meetings. This results in difficult choices in how the elected official can serve their community and meet their official duties. Impacted elected officials are left in a strange position of either risking their health by attending meetings in person or being in a remote location that needs to be, according to law, open and accessible to the public. This has resulted in occasions where elected officials have resorted to sitting on a curb in the front of their house or in a car in a public parking lot in order to participate in meetings. At the same time, other local governments are holding their meetings completely remote, have elected leaders who do not need to make those difficult choices. This inconsistency is what House File 820 fixes. House File 820 is a fix-through session law specifically addressing the cap between the beginning of the year through July 1st, 2021. It has a retroactive effective date of January 1st, 2021. Essentially, there would be no cap during from January 1st of 2021 to July 1st of 2021. As long as they met other statutory requirements for the medical exemption, elected officials would be able to attend meetings from home, allowing them to fulfill their civic responsibility without worrying about their health. One note, Section 1 was amended on the bill early in committee. This section no longer requires elected officials to disclose the location of those participating in meetings remotely under the military or medical exemptions. When we first passed this law, we didn't realize that they would have to do so. It doesn't make sense for people to have to disclose what military base they are on or their home address. And so that section fixes that. I finally want to point out the joint letter of support members received from the League of Minnesota Cities, Minnesota School Board Association, Minnesota Association of Townships, and Minnesota Association of Counties. There was near unanimous passage of House File 820 through committees, and I ask members to support this much needed bill. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 820.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. Will the clerk please call the roll of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Oh, aye.
Bo, aye. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franzen, aye.
Franzen, aye. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Gruenhagen. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Mecklin.
Macklin, no.
Mecklin, no. Nelson, N.
Nelson and I.
Nelson, N, aye. Noor. Noor.
No,
Noor, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Raleigh.
Raleigh, aye.
Raleigh, aye. Sandsted.
Sandsted, aye.
Sandsted, aye. Swazinski.
Lozinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 124 ayes and 7 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1203. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1203, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to workers' compensation, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Sherburne, Representative Wolgamott. To your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to ask for your support for House File 1203, a bill to extend the COVID-19 workers' compensation presumption for Minnesota's public safety, healthcare, and childcare workers from May 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. As many of you may remember, last April, the Minnesota legislature took critical action to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic by creating a presumption in workers' compensation law that guaranteed frontline workers would be protected by giving them assurances that they would not have to fight over whether or not they contracted COVID-19 in a workplace setting, a threshold that would be almost impossible to prove. Our legislation covers police officers, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, nurses, corrections officers, prison workers, healthcare workers, and certain daycare providers who cared for the children of essential workers, the heroes of this pandemic. Madam Speaker and members, I'm proud to report that since we passed this bill on April 6th of 2020, the presumption legislation has worked exactly as intended, and I've got the numbers to prove it. Dolly reports that workers filed 15,191 workers' comp claims for COVID in 2020, with about 80% of those coming from first responders in the presumption group. For this group, 86% of their claims were accepted, which is about 6,000 workers. For those 1,245 COVID claims from the non-presumption group, only 42% of workers' comp's claims were accepted. So, if the presumption group had the same acceptance rate as other workers, over 3,000 nurses, public safety workers, child care providers, and other first responders would have seen their workers' comp claims denied. Over 3,000. The group that had the most claims accepted was our healthcare workers, especially nurses, who account for nearly 2,000 of the accepted workers' comp claims. Our legislation had their backs. Not only did it work as intended, but it came in under budget. When this legislation was initially proposed, we heard projections that this provision could cost as much as $400 to $500 million in healthcare and long-term costs to the workers' comp system and the employers in it. But in fact, Madam Speaker, the total cost of the presumption was less than $10 million by the end of 2020, according to the Dolly report. This legislation has done its job, it's been under budget, and it needs to continue. The sunset deadline for this workers' compensation presumption is May 1st, 2021, a day that's now very much in sight. Come May 1st, if we don't take action, our frontline workers will lose this presumption. We're 5 weeks from that deadline with a long legislative break to come. When the legislature returns from break on April 6th, there will be only 24 days before this presumption expires. Madam Speaker, we cannot abandon our frontline workers. We need to see this presumption extended. That's why early in session, I introduced House File 1203 to extend this presumption 1 year until May 1st of 2022. No other bill to do so was introduced until last week. This bill was considered at the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council, not once, not twice, but 3 times, because I respect the WCAC process. During my presentations, the business side raised objections to extending the presumption through May. So after good discussion and collaboration, ultimately the WCAC agreed to a compromise of extending the presumption until December 31st, 2021. While the first responders who I've worked with on this legislation are not entirely satisfied with the date of December 31st, 2021, we're willing to accede to the guidance of the Workers' Comp Advisory Council. Out of respect for the WCAC, I've amended the bill to shorten the date of the presumption to December 31st, 2021. As my bill has made its way through the process, I've heard the desire for my good friends on the other side of the aisle and the business community to pass House File 2253, which is the broader workers' comp consensus bill that made it through the WCAC. I've listened and I've advocated with the author of House File 2253, Chair Sundin, as well as House leadership to bring House File 2253 to the floor for vote tonight. I'll be proud to support House File 2253, but if for some reason it gets tied up in the sausage-making process, for example, the 2020 WCAC bill didn't pass until December of 2020, with the clock ticking to May 1st, I want to make sure that we have every vehicle available to ensure that we don't leave our first responders out to dry in the battle against this pandemic. Madam Speaker and members, that's why I'm asking for your support for House File 1203. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its 3rd reading.
3rd reading, House File number 1203.
3rd reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Scott, Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is not the real bill that the Work Comp Commission endorsed and pushed out of committee. That work was done in a collaborative effort that dates back to 1998. And I would ask members to wait for that bill, which is House File 2253, which will be taken up shortly. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. Will the clerk call the names of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Oh, aye.
Bo, aye. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franson, yes.
Franzen, aye. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hassan. Hassan. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Heinzman.
Heinzman, no.
Heinzman, no. Listlegard.
Listlegard, aye.
Listlegard, aye. Mariani. Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
Donald, no.
McDonald, no. Mecklin.
Mecklin, no.
Mecklin, no. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Sandsted.
Sandsted, aye.
Sandsted, aye. Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye. Hassan. Hassan.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 102 ayes and 28 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Hassan moves that House File Number 389 be recalled from the Committee on Education, Finance, and be re-referred to the Committee on Workforce and Business Development, Finance, and Policy.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan. Representative Winkler, I wonder if you would make Representative Hassan's motion for her. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, members, Representative Hassan has spoken to both chairs. This bill relates to the Women of Color Opportunity Act and creates pilot projects, and I ask for a yes vote.
Any discussion to the Hassan motion? Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the Majority Leader could just explain in depth what that bill does and why it needs to go to that next committee, we'd appreciate that.
Well, you didn't ask him to yield. So all those in favor of the Hassan motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails.
No.
Sundin moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that House File number 2253 be recalled from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
The member from Carlton, Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion.
Any discussion to the Sundin motion? Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is the bill that was collaboratively put together by Labor Management as part of the Work Comp Advisory Committee. I would urge your support to suspend the rules so we can take this up immediately. Thank you.
Discussion on the Sundin motion to suspend the rules. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Aye. The motion prevails.
Pursuant to Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, Sundin moves that the rule therein be suspended and an urgency be declared so that House File number 2253 be given its second and third readings and be placed upon its final passage.
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This House File 2253 will complete the work that is started today and flush out the rest of the intentions of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council.
Representative Albright.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to personally thank Representative Sundin for his work on this bill, and I urge its passage so we can put it onto the governor's desk. Thank you.
This is a voice vote pursuant to the Constitution, so the clerk will take the roll on the motion.
It's a roll call.
Members, please vote. Will the clerk please call the roll of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Oh, aye.
Bo, aye. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franzen votes no.
Franzen, no. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Katiza Watun. Katiza Watun. Lislegard.
Lislegard, aye.
Lislegard, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald, aye. Mecklin.
Macklin, no.
Mecklin, no. Nelson, N.
Nelson, and aye.
Nelson, N, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Swazinski.
Brzezinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye. Katiza Watun.
Katiza Watun, aye.
Katiza Watun, aye.
Clerk will close the roll. There being 125 ayes and 6 nays, the motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its second reading.
Second reading, House File Number 2253.
Second reading. There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2253.
Third reading. The member from Carlton, Representative Sundin, to the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House File 2253 includes the recommendations of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council resulting from work over the past several months, including 5 public hearings. The Advisory Council passed these recommendations with unanimous support at its March 10th meeting, and therefore the bill has the full agreement of both business and labor. As members may know, the Workers' Comp Advisory Council has a statutory charge to review and submit its recommendations to the legislature each year on proposed amendments to Chapter 176, the Workers' Compensation Statute. The workers' compensation system supports employers, insurers, medical and rehabilitation providers, and injured workers to ensure employees injured on the job receive the benefits and services they need to recover from an injury and return to employment. Notably, House File 2253 includes the extension of the workers' compensation COVID-19 presumption through December 31st, 2021. The presumption is currently set to expire on May 1st. There are 12 sections to the bill. I can go through them in detail if necessary.
Discussion to the bill. Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to again thank Representative Sundin for working collaboratively on this bill. This bill 2253 comes at the conclusion of some long debates between both sides of the process at the Work Comp Council. These are never easy discussions, but it's important that we take these discussions in a pragmatic way because they do affect the bottom line for every business that employs someone. It's very important that we recognize that those that are on the front lines are supported. This bill does that. But much like a person who comes to the table with one tool, this comes to the table with a number of tools that employers and employees need in order to go forward under the auspices of the COVID pandemic. I want to thank both labor and management for their collaboration and for sticking to the process that has endured since the Commission was first established in 1992. Without it, I dare say that there would be pandemonium within the ranks, and I want to thank both of those gentlemen, Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Loon, for their assistance in putting this bill before us today. With that, Madam Speaker, I wholeheartedly support House File 2253 and urge everyone's support. Thank you.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drzkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just ask Representative Sundin to give us a detailed overview of what this is. I haven't read this bill yet. I haven't seen a summary of it, and I'd like to know what it does before I vote on it.
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go through the sections of the bill. Section 1 updates the minimum weekly compensation rate for temporary total disability. As an example of the impact on an injured worker, a worker earning $200 a week would see benefits rise from $133 to $200. A worker earning $300 a week would see a benefit rise from $200 to $233. Section 2 allows the department to assess a penalty against a health provider who bills an injured worker for treatment, which is prohibited by the workers' compensation law. Section 3 and 4 is an update for the workers' compensation fee schedule statute for payment of inpatient hospital fees. It requires use of a new Medicare web-based tool to calculate the maximum fees for inpatient hospital treatment. Medicare is phasing out the existing pricing tool, so the statute needs to be updated to reflect that change. Sections 5 through 7 update the ambulatory surgical center payment statute. The changes in these sections were recommended to improve payment accuracy. Sections 8 and 9 clarify existing prohibited practices and add 2 new prohibited
Not with
practices.
all the kids here.
The first is where a payer provides fraudulent written information to the department or an employee. The second, a new prohibition practice is for failing to pay benefits or correct behavior on a claim. Section 10 delays the due date on the prompt first action report, since the data used in the report will now be based on claims filed in Work Comp Campus, the new IT system that just went live in November of 2020. The language also allows the commissioner to exclude incompetent or unreliable data from the report. Section 11 prohibits subpoenas of the Department of Labor and Industry employees unless the department is a party to a claim or enforcement action or provides vocational rehabilitation services to an injured worker. And finally, Section 12, we've heard it all too many times today. It extends the sunset date of the current workers' compensation COVID-19 presumption statute from May 1st, 2021 to 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, 2021. Those are the details of the bill.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Sundin. I'll read the bill further. Representative Sundin, the first section of the bill, if he would yield, Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if you can, the first section that you spoke about, which would be section 1 in the bill, can you go through that again a little bit slower for those of us that didn't quite catch it all?
I will. Madam
Representative Sundin.
Madam Speaker, Section 1, again, I'll read it again and then maybe explain it a little bit. It updates the minimum weekly compensation rate for temporary total disability as an example of the impact on an injured worker. A worker earning $200 a week would see the benefit rise from $133 to $200 a week. A worker earning $300 a week would see the benefit rise from $200 to $233. These payments are calculated on a percentage basis, which actually interprets into about 2/3 of your wage being compensated through the workers' comp payments.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Representative Sundin and Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Will the clerk call the roll of those who have not voted yet?
Bo.
Bo, aye.
Bo, aye. Feist.
Feist, aye.
Feist, aye. Franzen.
Franson, yes.
Franzen, aye. Frazier. Frazier, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Gruenhagen.
Gruenhagen, aye.
Gruenhagen, aye. Hanson, J. Hanson, J, aye. Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Hausman.
Houseman, aye.
Houseman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Listlegard. Listlegard.
Listlegard, aye.
Listlegard, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald, aye. Nelson, N.
Nelson, and aye.
Nelson, N, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Pryor.
Pryor, aye.
Pryor, aye. Richardson.
Richardson, aye.
Richardson, aye. Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 128 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Announcements. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12 noon Tuesday, April 6, 2021.
Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn until 12 noon Tuesday, April 6, 2021. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Winkler moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 12 noon Tuesday, April 6, 2021.